All right. Hello. I have a very special stream set up for today. As you can tell, I have a very, very fancy tier list here. And as some of you may or may not know from my Dead by Daylight streams, I am a very, very large fan of the Krugster. And I may not have mentioned is that is because I own all of his movies. And so I thought since today is Halloween and many people enjoy the scary season that I would for today do a little bit of a surprise special and discuss all of the movies and put them in a very not the way this tier list has tiered them, but in a very silly, maybe somewhat serious rating. Obviously, this is a my opinions tier list. Obviously, there's a lot of movies and a lot of things in these movies that are for some people's taste over others. But I watched all 9 of these films again in the span of a day and 3 day and a half. So, safe to say, I have a very fresh memory to go off of for everyone on this. And I just thought it might be fun to do this. So the first things first is I want to get out of the way. On top of watching these movies, I am going to reference the documentary that came out, the Never Sleep Again Elm Street Legacy, because I have watched it. It is 4 hours. So those of you who are the big Kruger fans, I do highly, highly recommend it. It gives a lot of fun info that you may not have known about the creation, behind the scenes, fun facts behind a lot of the movies. And so, if you haven't seen it, I think it's a really fun watch, but it is 4 hours. And if you're not into documentaries, totally understand. But I thought it was fun. It gives a lot of fun feedback behind the movies. Uh, the other thing to note is that I'm probably going to go in a really crazy, wacky order because I I did not watch them in order. I was concerned I wouldn't finish watching all the movies before the stream because I was taking, I was taking notes. So I might go in a goofy order. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And final thing is because I want to make sure this is more for funsy and less me having a hyper serious critical I'm right you're wrong opinion piece. Uh I'm having big adult grape juice throughout this. So we'll see how long my serious opinion a piece about this lasts throughout this stream. Because there is a lot of movies and I have a lot to say. I started watching these at least 20 years ago. I was too tiny child. I should not have been watching these movies when I first saw them, and I have watched most of them at least a dozen times. So I would say that the impact these movies have had on my love of the horror franchise and my expectations in slasher is a lot. And you will see that when we start talking about some of them. So, I hope you enjoy the ride. And first things first is I need to change the name of these tiers because these tiers have not the names I want to use for them because I think in Nightmare on Elm Street, Nightmare is a positive. So for me, I'm gonna move this up. I think I can move it up. Yes, I can. Ha! Go up here. So Nightmare, I feel like we can all agree would be a more positive tier. right? Nightmare's the tier of like you did a good. It's the good movie for Nightmare. And then I think I'm gonna have how do I want to do this? I would say that Nightmare is a good, and then for reasons I'm gonna explain probably later on when a movie hits it, we're gonna have the popcorn tier. Uh, some of you may already know why it's called the popcorn tier, but for context, the only thing I'm gonna say is that it's a fun watch, like enjoyable. You can watch it with friends. The popcorn movie, right? Like not terrible. You wouldn't turn it off. So that's that tier. I'm then gonna delete. I think this row. We're gonna do not for me because I think it's fair to say that because of the depths of things that are covered in these movies, I don't know how many are actually going to hit this because I do love a lot of these movies, but not for me is going to be for the movies that I can see why people like them. Like, I can understand critically why someone may enjoy it, but I was bored watching it and I almost turned it off. And that this is something that has happened multiple times. Like, this was not even unique to my recent watch. This has been a historical issue for me and these movies. Uh, at least for the movies that land in this tier. Historical issue. So be warned that anything in this tier, I am not saying it's bad. I am saying that I had my own issues and I just couldn't I personally would just get bored with it. And then in this tier I'm putting icky and again, it's not that I say they're bad, it's that I felt gross watching them. And usually this is when we talk about these films that fall into this tier, it's going to be caused by like the themes being pushed. Whether that be by the writer, the director, the producer, um, there's a high chance that when we talk about things in this tier, this is going to be very noticeable when that happens. There's not a lot of the movies in this that actually fall into this tier. Uh, it was just very prominent and it was not something I could ignore, and thus it made me feel icky watching it. And so, if you're able to ignore it and still enjoy the movie, that's great. Which is why I'm saying this is a very me thing. Because there are some things that when I watch it, it becomes so obvious that I go, oh no, gross, icky, and I can't. But that doesn't change that there are positives in these movies. Like, obviously, these are Kruger films. Great kills happen all the time. And, like, many of these films are body horror and like really cool cinematic things are done. So even if movies fall into the icky tier, I promise I'm probably still going to have some cool positive things to say about it. It just probably is going to be the negatives are more going to be on the like creative side and not per se in the movie. It's just going to depend on where it lies in that sense. Um, oh shoot, I forgot to have the ambiance music. What did I have? There's no way. What do I got? Let's see. I'm gonna check that really quickly and see if I got something, because I remember I had this pre-set up and I forgot to turn it on. I believe. All right. Perfect. Wait a second. I thought Do they not just have why? Why would you have lyrics? I want to have the no lyric version. I hate it when it's like, yes, we have music you can use. But it's lyrics. Cry. If I can't, I can't, and we can have this as is. But fine. I will do as is then. I will just be I will figure it out for a future stream. All right. Anyway, now that I'm all prepared and ready to go and the ground rules are set, I think it would be it would be wrong of me to not start with the movie that kind of sets us all up for everything that starts us, which is the first movie, Nightmare on Elm Street, the original with our girl Nancy, and the original version of Krueger set up by Wes Craven. And I gotta say, um, there's a lot like this movie even rewatched now is really really solid. I'm not gonna lie. This was a joy to rewatch again. And you forget how many of the rules are set like in this movie cuz there's so many movies, right? Like you forget how many Wes Craven himself set up without going back to the very very first one and being like, "Oh yeah, these were all there." Cuz when you're watching like when you're in the middle and you're in like the Dream Warriors trilogy section, right? 3 through 5, you kind of start forgetting like, okay, was this something set up by the Dream Warriors stuff? Was this set up as just a one off, as like this movie thing? Because of just how messy it starts getting in the middle with the lore. Um, but Wes Craven and his idea of what he wanted Krueger to be is so well thought out in the first movie that it's so fun to go back and then see his design of like, no, this is what I wanted and this is what he's intended to be. And like it is so fun. Also seeing young Johnny Depp in this movie is so fun. Arguably having there's a lot of actors and actresses that start out in the Krueger franchise. Honestly, the one that I always forget started, or at least is remembered a lot as starting in. I don't recall if it's her first movie, but it's the Insidious actress. I think her name's Lynn Shay. She's the teacher in this movie. So there's the scene when Nancy's in the school and she's just having the lecture, and it's right before she starts seeing Tina in the body bag scene. Uh and her teacher is like trying to comfort her because it's right after Tina dies, but she decides to go to school anyway. And I was like, wait a second, that actress is here. She's in this movie. And I'm sure she has done other work, but because she's been in so many horror movies, I just didn't realize that she was in the first Elm Street movie. Cause I know that she's in like the older, like she's in some of the later ones. But the fact that she was in the first one made me realize, oh, she's in the later ones because of the fact that she was in the first one and they were just bringing her back for stuff. And that was what I was laughing of like, wow, there are so many people that got their start apparently in these movies. Um Also this is before people meet the Krueger that everyone remembers. Like if you haven't seen uh if you only know Freddy Krueger outside of the movies and just by like the memorabilia and the way people talk about him, everybody probably only thinks of like the quippy welcome to prime time bitch funny killer, which like don't get me wrong, I love that Krueger just as much. But Wes Craven's design for Krueger was definitely a scarier or like trying to be intimidating Krueger. And it was so fun to go back to the first movie and see him build this scary, intimidating guy back in the 80s before like all the other slashers like weren't talking yet. So like having the killer talk to you and not like he was trying to be like scary, but still like have the what we now see as goofy 80s effects. Like when he's meeting Tina and his arms stretch out across the alleyway, and I'm just like, I know this is Wes Craven trying to be scary, and I know I'm being influenced by the 7 other Elm Street movies, but gosh, I still see Goofy Krueger right now, and I feel bad. Like, this isn't Wes Craven's fault. Like, his image is so clear in this movie what he's trying to do, but, but like, he looks so goofy right now. Like definitely in the later half of the movie clearly does it way better, but there's certain scenes where because the other movies exist, I'm like, damn Kruger, you are so funny right now, and I know that wasn't your goal, but I see you still. I see funny Kruger coming. uh, oh god. The other parts though that I really loved about it is because Wes Craven sets up a lot of the tropes. There's the idea that the parents have to be assholes because the main trope around Krueger is the like sins of the parents. Like it's really cool in the first movie how subtle it is that the it's not as explicit yet because it's in the 80s. And if you've seen the documentary, Wes Craven goes into more detail of like he wanted Krueger to be this much more evil person when he was alive, but because of the satanic panic and the active investigation of like real potential child bad people who did very bad things, and we're not going to go into hyper real naming of that because I'm going to be not in trouble with Twitch right now. Not yet. We once I have more of the adult juice, I might say the bad thing, but I've got 9 movies for that. Uh because Wes Craven has said that was his intended design, but Satanic Panic, he was changed to just be a child takes away their life instead. And you can tell though that in his like scenes, he kind of like has his moments of like, oh, well, I guess I'm just gonna have these weird scenes that like if you're not prepared that this is the intent come off very implied, and then the parents are like clearly fucked up from stuff. Like the mom's an alcoholic and she acts completely normal in a lot of the scenes, but then she has the gin bottle in every scene in the kitchen, and Nancy finally calls her out on it way later in the movie. And then with Tina's mom, you have the like she has a man around, but it's not as explicit of like, oh, she cares more about men than her daughter like it does in some of the later movies. It's the idea of like the parents aren't caring as much about the kids as they imply, and now these children are paying the consequences, which I think is a very interesting idea that was brought up by the movie. Um lots of lots of cool things done with that, and it's very clear that like because he wanted to have this idea of like, yes, the parents took this into their own hands because they wanted to act like they were actually protecting their children, and in doing so, it caused their children to be in more danger. I think in reality is a very cool concept. And on top of that, because he's exploring it through being attacked through the dreams, an avenue which no one can protect, especially the parents who in most people's lives, if they have good parents, would be so desperate to try and protect through. It's a very cool avenue that he was able to create, which is why I think this franchise has such a interesting impact on horror, and also why so many directors and writers have had their hands in it, because the fun part about each of these movies is that Wes Craven only does 1 and 7, which means when you go to the other movies, uh you get to see a completely different vision of this basic idea and the rules that Wes set up. And I think that's really fun. Other cool stuff that I really like is the lullaby that's introduced. Fun fact that I learned, like, it's a pretty fun fact I think most people learned, but they go into more detail about it in the documentary, is that the lullaby is made by the actress's name is Heather. Her boyfriend at the time is the reason the lullaby is the way it is. They hadn't decided on like a set beat for it yet, but the guy she was dating at the time was like, "Hey, I have this idea." And that was what sold them on the lullaby. I just thought that was like really neat. Um and like that was always so funny to me. And I have to think. I would say the only thing that makes this really different is that the body horror aspect of like Krueger and the kills isn't in this movie. Wes Craven does not really do any body horror in his films in the Krueger franchise. So all no there's no body horror. Also, if we're talking about kills, Tina and Johnny Depp's I know his name's not Johnny Depp. I'm so sorry. It's just every time you see his face, it's like, "Oh, it's baby Johnny Depp." Anyway, their deaths are the most memorable by a lot. And anytime anything talks about this movie, it talks about how the practical effects to make the blood splatter of the spinning room so that his blood got and covered the ceiling and then splashed down. It's to this day when you watch that scene, it is so fascinating to watch the fountain come out from the bed and then splash everywhere down. By far, even if you're not so because the movies are split between the body horror ones and the non-body horror ones, by far, practical effects wise, the first one is great for doing the kills that aren't body horror for practical effects. I still like the alleyway arms are still a little goofy to me, but I can't, it it still has the charm of the 80s practical effects. And I have to give it to Wes Craven for he set all the lore up for Krueger really well, right? The parents kill him because of the 20 deaths of children, and it is a very strong setup for why all of the other teenagers are constantly being hunted by him, and it sets up a lot of like wiggle room for future directors to then work with Krueger as an icon. And I can't say anything other than the first movie is clearly a great nightmare movie. I loved rewatching this. I will probably always love rewatching this. So for me it has to go up in the nightmare tier for obvious reasons. If anything, if not because you have to give it to the fact that it was the one that sets up the rules for how Krueger worked as a character. And every movie after this tries to build up on him and do something new and fancy. And at least in this one, you get to see Krueger in like his simplest form, and it works so well. From here though, and this is where I think it's gonna be funny. I have to go, I think, like the complete opposite, which is because I'm not doing this in order. I'm going to jump to Wes Craven's other film because Wes Craven leaves the franchise not willingly, by the way. If you've seen Wes Craven's docu, uh again, the Never Sleeps Again Elm Street Legacy documentary talks about this so much. There was quote unquote creative differences which led to huge, huge, huge beef between Wes Craven and Line Cinemas, aka Ron Shay. His last name is Shay. And so Shay and him clash. Shay keeps the franchise with Line Cinema, and Wes Craven is like shit out of luck. And so they keep making these movies, and Wes Craven just can't. And so Wes Craven is pissed, and so we get all of these movies except for these two. These two are their own animals. Uh, and then this movie, the one I want to talk about, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Wes Craven's New Nightmare comes out because they made the final one, which was Freddy's Dead, which is the sixth one, which was supposed to be the end, and the joke is the fans were like, I want a new one, and Wes Craven's like, I want to make one, and Shay was like, well, I guess you could make one if we could approve the script. And the entire premise of New Nightmare is that he is writing the script while in the movie. So all of the actors are playing themselves and also playing the characters they played in the first movie. And this is so funny to watch, especially because you get to see Robert Englund play himself and play Freddy Krueger and also play the new imagined quote unquote edgy, darker version that Wes Craven wants in this movie. And it is, I can't I can't get over the scene when Heather, playing Heather, goes to interview about like, would you be interested in doing a new nightmare movie? And they don't tell her that Robert's gonna come and do the interview, and he comes out dressed as Freddy Krueger and calls all of the fans, you're all my children now. And she's sitting there freaked out because she's been having nightmares about the real Freddy Krueger. And Robert Englund is just being like, yeah, no, I love my fans. I'm gonna just do autographs right now as both Freddy Krueger and my handsome self. Don't mind me. And I'm just dying about like, this is such a weird vibe because the Krueger he's portraying in this movie is not the Krueger we've seen for the last 10, 20 years of movies. Because when we finally see the Krueger that Wes Craven is presenting in the script, he's wearing this like giant trench coat jacket. And he says none of the normal punchlines we've seen for the last 5 movies. And I hate this jacket. This jacket covers up the sweater, and you just like, it looks nothing like Krueger. He, he looks like I want to be like the college, like I'm pretending to be like the edgy college guys, the like cool kids. And I was just like, please, you are already such an icon. You don't need to You don't need to do this. And in the documentary, Wes Craven's trying to explain, I wanted him to not be like overshadowed by his his past of being this like funny quippy killer. So I wanted them to bulk him up and make his shoulders bigger. And so I wanted them to put him in this big jacket to be menacing. And I was like, dude, you made him look so silly. The jacket covers his he there's a scene in the movie. But the other okay, I'm sorry. I'm losing the train of thought. The scene that I'm trying to reference is that because of the script he's following, uh, it's referencing a lot of the first movie, which is part of my issue with the Wes Craven New Nightmare is that lots of the deaths are intentional references to deaths he already did in the first movie, which I know is the point because cough cough Freddy's trying to break into our world and he can only do that because he knows Nancy and it's oh my god, the script is such a silly meme. But the babysitter's death is a total ripoff of Tina's death from the first movie. And so when she's on the ceiling and Krueger, the edgy, meaner version of Krueger in the trench coat, uh, he's like huddled over her trying to make fun of Nancy's son because he's trying to save her. And I'm just like, dude, you have no shape because you're in this giant trench coat and you're just not intimidating because you're dragging a body on the ceiling and the trench coat is covering your whole form. The, clearly the one brain cell in Wes Craven went, make him edgier, and the other brain cell completely forgot that Krueger has shape and form, and the giant trench coat covers his shape and form. Oh, it was so oh, also, Nancy has a son in this movie. I'm pretty sure it's a fake family. I would hope to God that we didn't make the Heather has a real son in real life and we put him in this movie so that you can parasocially relate to her son. So I'm gonna assume, based on all of my research that I did before I did the stream, that it's a fake family. But his name is Dylan, and child acting is a thing. And I'm not saying Dylan was there were just moments where Dylan is pretending to be asleep. And then they decided his choice of being woken up is every single time is Dylan is just gonna scream at the top of his lungs. And I got to the point about halfway in the movie, I was like, can we have another choice? Does it have to be the scream every time? Like every time? Also, he had moments where they wanted him to try and talk deep and gravelly like Krueger did. But he's also a tiny, tiny child. Like, he couldn't have been older than 10. And his attempt at talking deep and gravelly was like these whisper voices of trying to imitate Krueger. And I was like, we need some help here. That's not we need some sort of direction. I'll take any direction, please. like the I the positives I have for this movie is that I really, really liked the mechanical hand and all the scenes with the new hand because the entire point that starts this is that her husband is cast, not cast, but like his is hired to make the new like Kruger hand that has the knives, and that is apparently the like start of the script that Wes Craven is writing, and the hand is like traveling on its own in our world and doing shit. And there is some direct scenes where it looks like one of the Alien if you've seen the Alien franchise, it looks very much like one of the face huggers in certain scenes where it's crawling on its like fingers, and then the back half of the arm, because it's all mechanical, is like deciding if it's gonna try and pounce or not. And it's so funny to see it. And like it's crawling up people and then deciding if it's gonna like stab them or like go on their face or crawl up them. And I'm like, I will take a hand monster. I love aliens. Hand monsters are neat. Any day of the week, I'll take a hand monster. Turning Kruger into a hand monster until Kruger makes it to our world, that's a hell of a time. That's a funny concept. I was all on board. I was not on board for edgy Kruger in a trench coat. Go back to the hand. Hand was way better. um, the other thing that I don't think a lot of people know is a lot of this movie is themed around earthquakes. And apparently, which a lot of people didn't know, is that the real earthquake in California happened when they were filming, and it was like a 7.1 earthquake. And so a lot of the shots of like stuff being torn down, like the streets and like buildings, uh Craven just sent a crew, a second crew, to go and film the destruction around California because he was like, "Well, I'm already using, like, earthquakes as part of my script." And, that was amazing to me of, like, you are either so good at timing, or Nightmare on Elm Street is actually cursed by the fact that you were like, "An earthquake is why Freddy's coming to our world," and then an actual earthquake occurred during filming, and you're all just pretending that the earthquake has nothing to do with your film. Like, what the fuck is going on? So I just that tidbit about this movie makes it so much better to me that a real earthquake happened during filming and he had to send that second crew out to get all the shots. Like, it's so comical to me. I can't. I just lots that it's so good. On top of that, because of so many shots in this movie where it shows the script and they're saying exactly what's on the script, I hate to be like the weird person, but I have to question whether Wes Craven considered the fact that his movie, for those of us who like to be the like big brainers for memes, questions whether free will is a thing in this movie. Cause like he has a script that's being written at the same time things are happening in the movie. Like there's a shot where Nancy goes to talk to Wes Craven as themselves, and he asks her, "Are you willing to play Nancy one more time?" And that is where the script ends from what the audience can see on his like old-timey computer that he's written. And I'm just like, so do you not know where the script ends from here? Is Nancy actually allowed to have the choice, or did you just not show her so that you could trick her into thinking she had free will? And I find that so fucking funny from the audience perspective that both Wes Craven in the movie and Wes Craven, the creator of this movie, gave us that shot to have the like, you motherfucker, you wanted to make us think that she had free will, but she doesn't. And there's a whole funny train of thought about that in this movie because of how many times the script is shown while people are saying the lines in the script. And it's so good. I think Wes Craven is really funny with writing, and he's really good at setting the roadblocks. I think my biggest issue with this movie is one, the amount of referentialism it has in regards to like the fact that a lot of the kills had to be very similar to the first movie because of the whole N- Nancy's the key to get Freddy to the real world. And so all these characters who aren't the same characters, like the babysitter, and like they have to die similar to the other people that were from the old movie. And making Krueger edgy instead of just actually scary bothers me. And you can really tell when you watch this movie that Wes Craven was bothered by other directors' takes of his character. This this is very much a like, I'm upset that other people did something different with my character, and I'm now gonna be a little salty about it. And I don't know how to like feel about that. Because like it's not entirely his fault, but I totally get that like he was taken out of the control room by Line Cinema and Shay for years. And now that he's back, he's like, "No, my character is supposed to be scary. How dare you?" and, and he took that scary and just made him so edgy. And it just I'm so sorry, dude. It just wasn't your fault. And I feel so bad. It wasn't. It just wasn't the thing. Um oh, I have okay, before I rate, I do have one fun fact. There is a scene in this movie with the funeral scene. It's supposed to have all of the real actors and actresses from the previous movie. And the documentary Never Sleep Again, Wes Craven admits that the reason Johnny Depp is not in the funeral scene is because he didn't ask him. Because Johnny Depp became such a big actor that he was like, I don't think I can ask him. And I was like, oh, dude, I like that's kind of sad, right? Like I understand that Nightmare on Elm Street is not like as big of a franchise as like the kind of movies that Johnny Depp ended up going to do, but I feel like you could have at least asked. Come on, that kind of sucks. We could have had Johnny Depp in this movie. I mean, like, at least let him say no. Anyway, this movie I definitely think is still worth the watch. It's still very fun, and I think for everyone who's seen the first movie and more importantly, if you're not a fan of the body horror aspect of the Nightmares franchise, like cuz a lot of the movies we're about to go into will end up falling into body horror. So like this one, like the first one, because it's by Wes Craven, they're not very body horror heavy. The deaths are very reminiscent of the first ones because of the intentional referential treatment. Um, I put this one probably more in like popcorn. Still very fun to watch. Absolutely a joy probably to watch with other people too, because if they are fans of the franchise, oh my god, kid, like this is so fun. Like I could definitely see why people like prefer potentially Wes Craven's image of Krueger. Because there's definitely two versions of Krueger. There is Wes Craven's version, and then there is the version defined by Nightmare 3. And so I guess, like, to make sense of that, I should probably discuss what Nightmare 3 is. For those of you who don't know, Nightmare 3, which is Dream Warriors, is what most people consider the best Nightmare on Elm Street film to ever be made. And I'm not here to argue that point. I'm so biased. I'm so biased. I'm so biased. I love this movie. Even in my 9-hour rewatch of all of these movies, this was by far the most fun. The most. It's not even, I'm sorry, it's not even close to how fun this movie is to watch again. And I'm sorry. I have to remind those of you who have not heard the line, this is the one that redefined the quintessential. I'm gonna Maud, I'm risking this for the biscuit. It is the line. We get the definitive, like, Kruger becomes the quip master. We have our moment of Kruger becomes the well-known uh man of the hour who targets people because of I'm sorry, I'm gonna not even pretend. This goes like way up here. This is we're not pretending where this goes. This is here. Oh no. It didn't record it, but it says I have desktop audio. Wait, I have an idea of why it didn't hear it. I know why it didn't hear it. It's probably because my headset died. It's probably because I was talking too much and drinking my adult grape juice. I didn't notice. Let me let me try that again. Although to be fair, seeing Kruger do the scene was enough. And for context, that is the line. Welcome to prime time, bitch. Uh, just moi, magnifique. The man, the myth, the legend. My man. I just, all I have to say, God damn, it is the line. For context, God, this movie is so fucking good. I can't get over it every time I watch it. And before I'm called out by anyone, I understand that this movie has what's the female actress's name? It's Patricia or what's her name? Patricia Arquette. Okay, I understand that so many people try to argue that because Patricia Arquette is the female lead, it's not just because of Patricia Arquette, okay? Yes, she is a phenomenal actress. We can all agree. But I'm not even talking about her character at this moment. I'm just talking about the fact that this is when Kruger really gets into the like doing body horror as the main way to target the fear of the teens. Like, there is this great scene, the first, like, quote unquote kill, where one of the teens in the like psychiatric hospital is a puppet master. Like, he's a fan of puppets, and he decides, like, while he's asleep, that Kruger decides he's gonna take each of his individual tendons from the top of his shoulder down to his like wrist and use it to animate him. And he does the same to his legs so that he can individually move his arms and his legs, walk him to the top of a like tower at the hospital and make it look like he jumped off the tower. And just watching the body horror aspect of a person being moved like a puppet by their tendons is so, so cool. And the rest of the kids who can see Kruger get the image of Kruger being the puppet master in the sky, seeing him move the tendons, but no one else can see it because the tendons are only cut in the dream. It is such a cool shot. Like, don't get me wrong. Wes Craven wanting him to be just a more realistic killer is very cool in its own way. But once we got to the body horror shit and using the dream realm to do cool dream realm body horror shit, I was all in. This was like, we're finally using the fact that this is in the dreams. Fucking awesome, right? Like, you get to do so many cool things. Like, Kruger becomes I have to I'm going to say this and it's going to sound bad, but I can't describe this other than Kruger becomes what is basically a penis snake. And tries to eat someone in the dream. And I just like, there are moments that it's very phallic just in general in the franchise, which is kind of the whole point because they had to try and imply what he did instead of just state it. But It was so funny in the documentary when they realized when they made the snake how phallic it was, and they had to admit that they accidentally made the Kruger penis snake thing, and I just it is by far the the fact that they were willing to commit to such goofy antics in 3 to play to the bit of yes I'm in a dream and yes I'm gonna do the dream shit. Oh my god, it's like one, you have the fact that I have to show the pig. The pig is so okay. Uh Nightmare 3 Rotten Pig. So, images. Where is my show me the no. Where is Nightmare Elm Street 3? Where is the pig on the table? Show me the pig on the table. So, there is a scene in Nightmare 3 that I really wish they would show me that there's a kitchen. Oh my god, I forgot that when I type it changes my pig. Not my rat. My rat gets changed. There's a pig on the table. Okay, okay. Here, wait a second. Here. So there's the so there's that's the start of the snake. I apologize. I don't trust that that one will be as okay, but understand that this snake has his face and it is ginormous. But anyway, the point is that there's a kitchen table in this movie and it is the pig on this kitchen table is so cool. And here. Okay, perfect. They used a real rotten pig on the table in the scene. And they had someone under it. And when they are in the documentary explaining that, like, they left a rotten pig to actually rot to make it the special effects for the scene. And in the movie, someone's underneath it, forcing it to move and, like, actually oink and how and describing how horrific it smelled. I'm just like, you didn't have to go this hard. It's just a pig, but I'm so proud of you for doing it. Like, you didn't have to, but thank you for doing it. Is really all I had to say. Like, it is holy fuck. Also, um, because the whole movie is called Dream Warriors, right? The entire premise of this movie is when the teens figure out because it's their dreams that are being invaded, they could potentially fight back because they're teens and like they in their dreams have their own like how they see themselves in their dreams. So one of the kids can't walk and is in a wheelchair and oh my god, the wizard master fucking our version of a dungeon master is called the wizard master and in his dreams he can walk and cast spells and it is we stand the wizard master. Holy shit. Fucking greatness. Also, I think what is her name? I think her name is Taryn. She in the movie is in the psychiatric hospital because as in her words, it's better than juvie. And she looks back, they ask her, "So what can you do in your dreams?" And she goes, "In my dreams, I'm beautiful and bad." And I'm just like, "Oh, oh my god." I remember why this was my favorite movie as a teenager. Oh, I see. She's in all leather and pulls out 2 switchblades, and she has the largest mohawk you have ever seen. And I'm not shocked that I still think it's one of the best movies. Like, it just ain't even close. Um, there there's a lot of the cool like because Dream Warriors kind of starts the like Dream Warriors trilogy. There's some cool stuff introduced lore wise though. So like This is the introduction of Weston Hills Psychiatric, which is where they're all staying. And by the way, I don't know why every time I looked this up, and I think it's because of the Freddy v. Jason movie. The hospital is absolutely still in Springwood. I don't know why everyone's so confused about that. Everywhere else they're in the movie is in Springwood. Like the guy that Nancy is quote unquote dating but not dating because the writers decided to take that out of the movie for reasons. Like she they go to like a Thai restaurant that's near the hospital, and it's explicitly stated that it's his favorite Thai place in Springwood. So I just don't understand the confusion. Also, Jason was brought to Springwood in Freddy v. Jason, so the psychiatric hospital, it's all the same place. I don't You're all being very silly about the confusion. I understand Freddy v. Jason causing confusion, but we'll get to that can of worms later. That can go way down the corner. I don't want to think about what Freddy v. Jason does. Um, let's see. Oh, there also is cool things done because of the body horror aspect. So like Freddy now keeps the souls in his body. So this is the first time you get to see the like faces peering out of his souls in the like burnt flesh scene that is seen like near the end of the movie, which is super super fun. Like I definitely would say of the body horror stuff, because they added it, adding the fact that like he can now store the souls in his body and having them like peek out of him in weird fun ways, it leads to one of the coolest death scenes in a later movie. It's not in this one, but because of the introduction of body horror and the souls being in him, one of the movies has, I think, my favorite death scene of Krueger. It's just not this one. Does not change my ranking for this though. Also, this is the definitive introduction of like Krueger is the child of 100 lunatics. His mom being Amanda Krueger. His mom is shown as a nun, but she's not called Amanda Krueger as the nun. You meet her as Sister Mary Helena in the movie, and Mary Helena tells the guy in the movie, who I just don't care about. I'm sorry. I should care. I just don't. It's Nancy's not real love interest. He he's he asks Mary Helena why she's like always at the hospital, and she's like, "Oh, I just I work. I have to constantly check on the children." And then you find out she's always there because like nearby there's a closed asylum that was closed in the 40s because a person who used to work there was locked in the asylum. And because they were locked in the asylum, the 100 lunatics did a very bad no thing for a couple days, and that person that got locked in ended up pregnant, and we're just not gonna go into the big explicit details. And that child was Krueger. And that's the like, you get the understanding of, all right, Krueger had no good bad time as well. But they do not try and paint it as like anything of like, ah, yes. They also don't explicitly say that she was a nun at the time. She just is a nun now. And I'm saying that because of what's gonna be talked about in 5. I'm just saying it now so that my dumbass doesn't forget to say it later. Because I know. I know. Um, Also, this is when Nancy in the movies dies. So, like, I would say by far story wise, this is great. Also, Kirsten, who is Patricia Arquette's character, is genuinely very, very fun to follow. And I really liked her personality. And I do get why people think that because it's Patricia Arquette, it is really fun and good. And I get it. I get why they're all. I It does kind of affect the movie. Okay, I'm sorry. It's hard. She was so good as the character, and her not returning for Kirsten in the other roles does affect those other movies, and it makes me so sad that she couldn't come back for the other movies. I I have feelings about it. But I do say I really am happy that the director of this movie added the, um the body horror, because body horror became such a integral part of the Nightmare franchise, and it's so much better with the body horror, I'm sorry, I can't. Like, I can't get over how much more fun it is to have all the dream sequences with the body horror and the, like, funny gags of Krueger turning himself into inanimate objects. Like, in that primetime scene I showed a little bit of a clip of, he pops out of like, that TV's a normal TV, and suddenly his arms explode out of it, and his head pops out of it. He It's so fun now to watch him, like, anything in the room that you fall asleep in can suddenly become a threat because of the body horror aspect of it, where he can become a horrific body thing, or because of body horror, you could meld with the thing, and it's so fun. It's so great. And if we're talking about the deaths, I would definitely, I'm really biased because when they first introduced the body horror, the puppet man and his fall because of the tendons it was just so well done. But I will say that the the way Taryn, I think her name is pronounced Taryn, but the girl who was the junkie, the way her death is actually presented in the movie is really well done, because of the fact that Freddie implies that because she was a junkie, they used to be really good friends. Because of the fact that she was an addict, she probably slept a lot. And so her death has the scene where she has the old marks on her arm, like track marks, and they're basically like opening and closing, begging to be stabbed for like more drugs. And instead of having his normal claws, they turn into injection marks, like they turn into syringes. And it's the idea of like, but in actuality, I make you happy in a really fucked up way. And that was a really cool way to use Freddie to play on her fears in a like very like direct way, because she was trying to fight it. I thought that was a very cool way in comparison to the other characters, because like the Wizard Master, obviously he's afraid of his wheelchair when he wakes up. So Freddy using a giant wheelchair with like it's a comically giant wheelchair that's like chasing him down, and it's got like spikes in the seat and like on the sides, like something you'd see in gladiatorial combat. That's not bad. I'm not gonna argue it's bad. I just thought it was a little comical to use it in comparison to some of the other ways that could be done. And so like definitely like I definitely like could see people maybe not liking this movie in if they're not a fan of the body horror aspect of the horror genre. Uh but nah. I definitely understand why this is the quote unquote fan favorite. This is also my favorite. I could rewatch this movie another 10 times. It is so much fun. Um from there, though, oh my god, which one do I wanna talk about next? I feel like to make things fair, and because I kinda brought it up, I have to talk about this goober. I'm I'm gonna because of how dark it is, I'm gonna separate. This is not where I'm rating it, this is not final rating, I'm putting it here so it can be seen because it's kinda dark. The background of it's kinda dark. So, like, just keep in mind, I'm doing this so, like, it can be seen. So, I have I have about comments about Freddy v. Jason. And it's not the fault of Freddy v. Jason. I think it's the fault of the people who decided to have Freddy v. Jason made the way it was, and I'm just gonna state this straight up at the very, very front end of this, just because I don't want people to misunderstand. Uh, this movie was made by a guy named Ronnie Yu, and Ronnie Yu had never seen a Freddy or Jason movie before creation, and has admitted that he had to watch all 17 movies before making the films, and then even after watching them, the only Freddy movie he even liked out of all the movies that existed at the time was the first one. So, I I'm just gonna say that like it's I can definitely tell that the movie is just odd as a watching experience. And then he went on in interviews to say, and this is like quotes that I'm paraphrasing because I didn't want to hunt down and like state his full quotes because these were in longer interviews, but he, he was intentionally trying to make this movie like a popcorn movie, which is why this is the popcorn tier. And I don't think it deserves to be in this tier. I'm just putting it here so everyone understands. He was trying to make this a popcorn movie, and this movie was heavily inspired to be like Godzilla and King Kong movies, and added extra blood to be inspired like the first Elm Street movie. So I have feelings. I have many feelings. Um And the first one is that the entire premise of this movie is that everyone in Springwood has forgotten that Freddy exists. So Freddy gets into Jason's nightmare and sends Jason to Springwood so that they'll remember who Freddy is. And I can hear you saying, look, on face value, that's not terrible. My issue is that this movie becomes very Freddy loaded, and it doesn't balance that well with Jason as a character at all, because Jason doesn't talk. And I don't mean that in a like bad way. Jason doesn't talk in his movies, but like Freddy in this movie is like the Freddy we know in 3 through 6. He does quips and one-liners and is trying to make jokes. And Jason's like a brick wall that looks at Freddy every time he opens his mouth. And it feels like it should have been a different character, in the sense of like Freddy doesn't have anyone to bounce off of in the same way he normally does. Like when Freddy's chasing people and he says his like one-liners, they're either scared and so it's funny because of the juxtaposition of like I'm saying a one-liner, ah ha ha, and they're terrified because what the fuck, or they're the person being killed can still make a response back of like I'm being a brat, what the fuck do you think you're doing, and they like make a response back to what Freddy is saying. But when Freddy does dream stuff on Jason, it's Freddy is saying all these things, and like yeah, I guess it could be cool about the fact that like Freddy figures out that Jason's afraid of water, but it doesn't feel very interesting because of the fact that like Jason doesn't say anything the whole time, because he doesn't like he does this is not a fault of Jason. This is a fault of like they treated Jason and Freddy like kind of as the guy who directed it mentioned, two monsters fighting to see who's the better monster. But Freddy is not the same as Jason in the creation of slasher movies, which I think is a bad thing that they forgot to take into account. Like, Freddy was revolutionary in horror because he wasn't just a guy behind the mask. At the time, Halloween and Jason and many slasher killers, even Scream, I think, well, no, Scream kind of joined the ranks of Freddy later, but the idea is it was just a guy behind the mask and they could be changed out. Krueger was the first time that a slasher killer was a voiced character and is the same guy. And so the idea that they could treat him the same as Jason in the sense of like he's not a mainstay, very beloved personality. And this is not like to discredit people who like Jason. It's just that the reason Jason is loved is not to the same thing that Krueger is loved. Jason is not the same actor in all 10 plus of his movies. Krueger, at this point that this movie came out, was the same actor, and so it's just it was really jarring to see him play a movie where for a lot of the movie it felt like a Freddy Krueger plotline, right? And then suddenly we're joking about steel kills and Jason shows up and kills a bunch of children in a cornfield and you're just like, "Well, what the fuck is going on?" Uh it just like it just was weird. Like I I'm going to put this movie in not for me. Like I think there are people who could enjoy this movie. I just don't I just don't think it's for me because of just like how much they tried to mix these two IPs and it doesn't feel like they were balanced well. Um especially because of the fact that like Kru- Kruger is like such a strong personality character and Jason is not a personality forward killer. I almost feel like it would be better if it was like Kruger and Chucky because they're both comedy focused killers and they could both bounce off of each other and then that way like there'd be something to work with when they're both talking in a room and like they could also potentially both punch down at each other, especially because of the fact that Kruger was mean to children uh and Chucky is stuck in a doll that looks like a child. The amount of jokes and banter the two of them could have at each other is a lot more because Chucky also like mainly focused killed adults. Like I feel like it's funnier that way, right? You have two characters in like opposites and then like my brain goes that's a very fucking funny group to have in the same room and they're the same like type and it's just not there. And I don't quite understand why it wasn't done that way, but like I can see potentially people who just wanted to see these two killers fight maybe enjoying this movie. It's just not quite what I was expecting. I will say though, in this movie is the fucking funniest thing I've ever seen, and I can't believe it. And the only way I was able to describe it when I saw it was where is it? Fucking fucked up Kruger centipede bong scene. And that doesn't explain like at all the scene, I don't think, but I had to pull it up and this is what I'm talking about when I'm trying to explain fucked up centipede. Kruger in this scene is trying to prevent one of the kids from getting hypnosil, which is a drug that is it's a drug that's supposed to prevent you from dreaming. And this drug is introduced in 3. But the only person who ever takes it in 3 is Nancy, so it's just not really that big of a deal. So it was neat that they reintroduced it in this movie. So Kruger goes to the stoner because the stoner falls asleep in the scene and is just like, oh yes, let's just do drugs. But he approaches him as this really fucked up centipede, blows the bong smoke into his face, and then goes down his throat as the centipede and like possesses him. And it's wild. I like, again, Kruger being fucked up phallic creatures is kind of just the vibe, but the fact that we doubled down on him being fucked up phallic creatures is pretty great. I can't get over the level of like we're just fucked up creatures here. So yes, this is a definitely just not for me movie. I wish I wish I could enjoy this movie. I don't know why I can't enjoy this movie. This movie is clearly meant to be junk food. Um I just can't. I don't know why. It's so it's just so weird. It's so weird. Okay, I'm gonna finally try and start tackling some of the like how I put it. I'm gonna do one of the ones that I think are gonna be considered questionable. Not in the sense of like my opinion is questionable, but like I think people might be upset. So I'm gonna start with Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And so I am going to start very carefully, which that this movie historically, this is not even a this is not even a me thing. This is not even a like this movie historically is just very controversial. So I'm putting that right here before we talk about it. If you have never seen a Kruger movie, I am just stating that this should not be your first one. Um, there's a lot of good places to start. This movie has been heavily considered a controversial movie, and I understand. So I'm gonna talk about the movie in the context of the movie and my experience with it as a movie, especially like the first times I watched it. And then I'm gonna talk about all the controversial shit that happened when I, like, became an adult, saw the controversial shit, rewatched it in the context of the controversial shit. Because that I think I want people to understand that like I can understand why people like this movie, but I can't my opinion of this movie has changed. And I think that other people may also have gone through the same opinions I did, especially if you're a big Freddy Krueger fan and have watched the documentaries and have heard about many of the things that have happened to the cast and crew of this movie. So I want to give context that these things aren't portrayed as directly in the movie, um, but it is kind of noticeable, and so I just want to give this movie as fair of a shot I can as a movie before I talk about why it's hard to rewatch. Because Freddy's Revenge, as a movie, gives off what I wrote down when I watched it was big bisexual energy. Um, and when I first watched it as a teenager, uh, big gay energy. Uh, and this was considered very controversial at the time because this movie came out in the 80s. And very understand like I'm not going to say I agree, but as many of us know, in the 80s was the AIDS panic, and I think there is some understanding of why people may have had overreactions. This is not something I'm allowed to agree with. I think obviously people in that time were maybe a little overreactionary of something they didn't understand. But it it just kind of is what it is. This movie portrayed characters experiencing homoerotic stuff. The coach is shown in leather gear in a gay bar. The main character, Jesse, is shown being attracted to a female character and also shown potentially having not exactly the like straightest kind of relationship with Ron Gardy. And I want you to know on my rewatch I wrote Jesse and Ron robbed of the true ending. So like for my fellow LGBT fans who do still hold this movie in their heart, I do understand. Jesse and Ron are very very cute in this movie. They have some very wholesome scenes. Them being like absolutely constantly picked on by their very explicitly gay coach to be like always like you have to go and like do extra punishment all the time in this movie. It's very very explicit. Also um it's really like I have a hard time with it because I know who Kruger is as a character, but it's super weird and very explicit when Kruger says, and I quote, I need you. You have the body to Jesse. And I was like, that's weird. That, like, I don't like that, like, I remember when I watched it the first time because I had already watched the first movie, I felt kind of icky, but then but then I got the context of other stuff from like the docu and then I was like, "Oh, that made it more icky." Oh, oh, that became oh, it was no, I'm not a fan of that. So I just like there's like very clear intent with some of the stuff in this movie of what they wanted to express, and I just think the choices of the way they expressed it was not well handled is like the way I want to phrase it. Also, this movie with the rest of the movies just doesn't feel like a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Because instead of Kruger following like the rules set up by Wes Craven, he's trying to possess Jesse and use his body with the like intent of then attacking people in the real world. And it's very very like implied to be symbolic of Jesse killing the like he kills two people in the movie and it's very implied that it was him killing, and the people he kills is the coach and Ron Gardy, and it's very uncomfortable for me to have that conversation of like the people who have died where the coach, who some people who've seen the scene interpreted as was hitting on him in the gay bar, and the male very much seen as potential love interest to like it very much comes across as Kruger being his not handling his infatuation with men, and so then he kills them. And I think if Kruger did not have the baggage of the intent of the first movie, where he was a already child murderer and like doing bad things, like I understand like in just the context of the movie by itself, I understood what it could have been. I just have I feel like this kind of story could have been told without Kruger, and so I have concerns of the type of messaging it gives using Kruger as the vessel of that. Um, which again, that could be more of the issue of the modern lens looking back on it, which is why I try not to use that and try to just use movie as a movie. What is the movie itself saying? It's just really, really, really hard, and I don't like. It's hard with this one. Um, as for the like in the movie, really, really the funny like implications that they did in the movie that were like not as like questionable, that were just funny. Um, he's cleaning out his room and he's trying to clean out his like make it presentable. And Jesse has in his closet a board game called Probe. So the idea that he has a probe stuck in his closet is just so funny. Um Also, because there's just not really that many dream sequences in this movie, lots of things randomly catch fire in this movie, and this is in comparison to a lot of other movies. Like, I need you to understand that while everyone in the room is awake, a bird catches on fire and combusts. An unplugged toaster catches on fire, and then hot dogs catch on fire, and then there's everything that happens in the pool scene at the end of this movie, which I cannot get over. Pretty much anything that happens at the pool, and this movie got so much flack about the pool in general, about how the pool stuff was handled, that in the Never Sleep Again documentary, multiple people that were on the team for 2 just openly said, "We didn't know how to end the movie, so we just did the pool scene." I was just like, "No, you can't say that. That's like shit you keep to your grave. Like, you can't just openly say shit like that. What the fuck are you doing?" So overall, if I were to just take the movie as a movie, I would put this as not for me. Like, I think this movie, if I were to just take this movie as what it is, this is a not for me movie. Like, and I do want to note there is the positive in the sense of I really like the portrayal in the sense of someone struggling with identity, the bus that is used at both the start at the end. Because I know I've been ragging on this movie a lot. And there are some scenes. The issue for me is it just doesn't feel like a Kruger movie. But now I have to get into the reason that this movie is not actually this rating, and that is because of the documentary. And so for people who are probably older than me and probably have seen a lot more of this shit go down in the public's eye, when this movie came out, it was not received well. And the writer, David Chaskin, his name is Chaskin, um, he did not handle it well, and it was notoriously blamed on the actor who played Jesse. And there are like quotes from like him saying to reporters that Mark Patton, the actor who plays the main character Jesse, played the character quote unquote too gay, and that is why the movie was poorly received. And it wasn't until like 30 years later in the Never Have I Sleep documentary where Chaskin finally revealed that he actually did intentionally write the script the way he did with the subtext of the homoeroticism. And I that for me moves this movie to very icky. especially because there is another documentary about Mark Patton that I do really I because I want to support people, I want to support Mark Patton. So there's another documentary called Scream Queen: My Nightmare on Elm Street, which is Mark Patton talking about what it was actually like to work on this movie, and the consequences of how he was treated by David Chaskin specifically, and the fact that he was blamed for how this movie went, because Mark Patton was in the closet when this movie was made. And so the fact that David Chaskin wrote the movie the way he did, it it does make this movie really hard to watch, especially when you know all of that in context. And especially on my rewatch, I felt very, very icky watching it. If you watched this movie and this is like, especially if you're in the LGBT community and you watched this movie growing up, I am not saying that you can't love this movie still. I am just pointing out that once I heard about what David Chaskin did to Mark Patton, and the fact that Mark Patton was in the closet when this movie happened, uh it makes it really hard to rewatch for me, and it makes me feel really icky to watch it. And so I am putting it in this tier. Uh and I can't in good faith recommend this movie in the franchise to other people, and instead would recommend watching Mark Patton's docu. Because the docu still talks about Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and I think that is a much better way to experience if you loved the actor, if you loved the lead, if you loved what he did in that movie. I would rather support that actor. This is where I'm going to insert. Please go watch Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. Oh my God. That, because to me, that is more important than my love of Freddy Krueger. And I can't believe that David Chaskin waited 30 years to finally admit in the fucking documentary that it was his intent the whole fucking time and just didn't say anything. Like, that's just really fucking shitty and gross. And so yeah, this whole movie now feels super icky. Like, super icky now, and I makes me sad because this franchise is something I love and is super fun, and now it has this icky movie in it. So now I want to go to a something a little more lighthearted and fun, and I need to say fun because holy fucking shit. Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare is the most 90s movie I've ever seen in my god. Okay, it's not actually the most 90s movie. I've seen other franchises that were 90s, but for a Freddy movie, this is the most 90s movie I've ever seen in my fucking life. Holy shit. So for context, I didn't mention it in 3 because there was so much good magnificent shit to talk about. But Nightmare 3 is so beloved that it opened its movie with an Edgar Allan Poe quote talking about I believe the exact quote is that sleep is the like miniature death. Like, it's one of Poe's most like memorable quotes, and that's done at the start of the movie before the movie like starts. Freddy's Dead has, I'm gonna put quotations on quotes because it opens with a fucking Nietzsche quote, and then right afterwards puts "Welcome to primetime, bitch," Freddy Krueger as a quote, and the audacity of having a philosopher's quote next to goddamn Freddy Krueger was such a meme. I was losing my goddamn mind. Like, oh man, the audacity though. Like, I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just pointing out that holy fucking shit was that so funny. Then, then I'm gonna look at my exact notes because this movie was so funny. Oh Lord, the 90s soundtrack, 90s everything. Like, I apparently could not handle how instantly 90s this movie is. Like, this movie became so just embraced. It just embraced the 90s, and I was just like, "What? What are you doing? What?" Like, it was so it was so immediate. I was just like, "Oh, Lord." So what I really liked about this movie is that the premise of this movie that I think is so fun and unique is that the it's the final Elm Street kid. Uh and for context, this movie is very much like presented as an alternate I'm going to okay, I guess technically this is a theory. I don't know if this is like 100% accurate. But the reason I think this is an alternate reality inherently is because there is a scene with a teacher and a chalkboard of like presenting where Freddy came from. And it like doesn't match up with any of the lore from any of the other movies, which is great. Which is part of why I think it's intentionally an alternate reality movie. Uh, because I think I wrote down, like in the alternate history in the 1940s, like which we know is when like Kruger would have been born to the Amanda Kruger and the whole nun weird situation that's set up from the Warriors trilogy, right? It suggests that Kruger they believe was involved in the death of Elvis with a question mark. And I need you to know I was fucking cackling looking at this chalkboard that like suggested that Kruger came from the Saxons and like more importantly in this timeline of this movie, uh the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki didn't happen. And I was just like, "What the fuck?" Like, this is a hell of a weird, like, what did Kruger do? What what? Like, they built this timeline of, like, he affected major world history events, but also killed Elvis, but also, like, this chalkboard is crazy. I don't again, my like ability to find shit in these movies is hard because these movies are ancient and I don't know if people care enough about the chalkboard as much as I did. But when I saw the chalkboard, I was losing my goddamn mind. Like, I need you to understand, this chalkboard is so funny. Oh, I want to know if the chalkboard image exists. Cause the like the biggest thing to note about 6 is that the big point is that there's only one kid left of the Elm Street kids, and so Freddy's trying to use him, and you believe that he's using him to just get more kids, but in reality, he's trying to use him to locate his child. And that's when I was like, wait, Kruger has a kid? Kruger has a kid in your alternate history? Kruger had a wife and a child in this universe? Who in the fuck? Whomst the fuck? Whomst in the fuck did Kruger marry? Like, so that was my major like holy fuck, right? because the idea that Kruger had a wife and then had a child, and that the child made it out of Elm Street and out of Springwood and just existed and no one knew. Fascinating as a concept in this movie. Um, on top of that, Freddy took away this kid's memories, and so partway through the movie, this main boy is convinced he's Kruger's child. And it's so funny when Kruger's like, dude, I had a daughter. Get fucked. I just wanted you to bring my daughter, and just kills him. And you're just like cackling of like, okay. Like, it's 10 out of 10 of Kruger just being a funny guy in this movie of just like, no, I just wanted you to bring my daughter. Um Honestly, way this movie is way more fun than I think people give it credit for. I think I definitely would put this above Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Like, I do not think it gets to join the true nightmare experience, but like they there's a if we're gonna go back to the stoner conversation, there's a scene where another stoner is just getting stoned, and Kruger like he falls asleep, and you get the 90s PSA of "This is your brain on drugs," like the egg frying scene, and Kruger just fucking like slaps him away and goes, "That's just an egg." And he looks out the TV to the stoner guy and goes, "Wanna do drugs?" And it just immediately becomes like a hypnotic, like technicolored great, like it's so funny. And for anyone who remembers, that is the scene that kid he dies in the you forgot that he dies in a video game. That's the one where Freddy is pretending to play a video game, and he you and he makes the quip of "you forgot to take the power glove," and turns his glove with the knives into a like glove with a bunch of the funky buttons to like move the kid in the video game to kill him. It's again, I Robert England as Quippy Kruger is one of the best. I can't get over how funny he is as just constantly making the one-liners. Uh I just it's so good. I So, but anyway, the important part I was trying to get to is that because I can't believe I can't find this alternate history board. I knew I should have tried to take screenshots from my copies of the movie. Damn it. Anyway, so uh basically the reason I find this movie so like hysterical is that because the town has no children. Zero children. So it's so interesting to see the consequences to Springwood of the idea that no children are allowed to exist in Springwood. Basically, Kruger is like a plague in the sense that they don't have to even know that he like is a person. It's just that if a child exists in Springwood, Kruger will attack them, which is such a funnier concept of the like if you go all in on the sins of the parents, instead of the kids having to have had done anything, or instead of the kids having to have known who Kruger is, the parents can't have any kids. They can't even adopt a child. Like, the children had to be evacuated out of Springwood to protect them from Kruger, and that is such a like funny interpretation of what Wes Craven was trying to do in the first movie. And I think people get too like caught up in the how 90s this movie is because of how funny and cool that concept is. Like, treating Kruger like a plague that is the consequence of everyone who lives in Springwood for killing him is a unique approach to him, and I think sometimes Six gets a little bit of shit because of the era it's in, and I thought it was a great and fun watch. Um, honestly, of all of the movies, uh, this one was really funny. I also have to note that to its credit, because obviously Kruger is often used as to like moral thing of talking about, not in the sense of like morals of trying to tell morals, but like trying to discuss the like hard conversations of things that happen in real life, but trying to do it in a like not as direct way. At least that was done in a lot of the earlier movies. Um, it was really I really appreciated, there's a line said when Kruger is reintroduced uh to his daughter, and his daughter says, "We're not in Springwood. You can't hurt anyone here." And he says the line, every town has an Elm Street." And I personally just really liked the acknowledgement of, just because it's not Kruger and just because it's not this movie, the like acknowledgement of like, these things could be happening, and like you should want to protect your kids. Just, maybe do it in a healthier way. Cause the Wes Craven clearly was like trying to point out that the vigilante part was bad. Whether you agree with him or not is fine, but he was clearly showing that those parents weren't good people, which is why he made them an alcoholic and like not caring about their children. And then they did the vigilante justice, and like they were still shown as bad parents. He had his own like moral compass on his opinion of that. And so I like that each director had this through line of like, they still, regardless of whether you agree or you disagree, they still want to point out that something still has to be done. Like, the bad still has to be stopped. Even if you don't agree with how it has to be stopped or whatever, they're just kids, and we gotta help them in some way. And I think that like, I like that even in the cheesiness and even in the like goofiness and even in the like, oh, we're doing quips and one liners, like the movie will sometimes take a moment and a deep breath and take a time to acknowledge the dark topics it covers. And I think that's nice, and it's very fun to have those moments because of how goofy the movies are. And so uh I hold a lot of respect for Six and what it does. Uh and then we have to acknowledge the error it's in, and the last 20 minutes where it decides it's in 3D, and she is handed a real pair of physical 3D glasses to remind the audience to put your 3D glasses on. And when she enters the dream state, they meld to her face. And I I can't get over how I this happens a lot in a lot of the 90s, early 2000 movies. But I can't get over how goofy it is once that sequence starts, to like, in this scene, Kruger's daughter enters Kruger's brain, and then things just start flying out of her, like at her, not out of her, at her. Like, the brain demons start flying at her face as she enters Kruger's brain. And like, when they hold weapons, they're held out for the 3D camera. And I'm just like, ooh, so close. Also, when Kruger dies, like his head jumps out multiple times in a fiery explosion for the 3D camera. And I'm just like, ooh, the man, we really thought 3D was here to stay, huh? We were real confident about that. Not a we really thought, we like, We couldn't have just made an alternate version to not okay, like, I really wish and hope and was I'm just sad that we didn't have a version that wasn't the 3D version. Like, I just was hopeful. I was hopeful. Um, but yeah, no, it's just the version with the 3D glasses, and then when she exits the dream realm and Kruger's defeated, the 3D glasses stop being melded to her face, and I'm just like, oh, that's certainly a thing, isn't it? Huh? That's a time. Uh, I don't think it's enough to dissuade my love of the movie because even during the weird 3D glasses portion, there's some like funny like sequences in it. Also, they go into like weird I'm gonna call it weird. They go into Kruger's childhood memories in the brain part, and like that's fine. Uh, I'm okay with it, and it doesn't bother me that much. As like a movie, it's just it was so funny how overly 90s it is. Like a kid gets in trouble at the school for or the not at school, the like psychiatry place, the adoption center, they're like wherever the main central place is. I want to say that's where they're being adopted from. You can tell I really was paying attention to that part and not every time they were in Springwood. Uh, for having a pipe bomb, like straight up, one of the characters just has a pipe bomb and it gets confiscated. And I was just like, all right, sure. Are like the main female character who is Kruger's daughter, I believe her name is Catherine. Like it's a K name because the whole point is it's K Kruger, and I think it's Kathleen or Catherine. It's Kathy. I'll just call her Kathy because that's easier. Kathy, like basically is able to use fucking ninja throwing stars during the final fight, and I was like, ah, yes, this character who's clearly knows how to fight like a ninja totally could use the stars. I can't it I definitely would say for a popcorn movie, way more fun. Oh my god, every single time. Also for body horror aspect, one of the characters is deaf, and Kruger takes his hearing aid and like makes it go from you can't hear anything to you can hear everything and makes the guy's head explode. And it is such a cool scene. Like, this is definitely, for me, perfectly fits the popcorn label, and it doesn't rely on you having had seen, like, I think you could have watched this one and not have seen, like, the others as much. Like, definitely could have fun with this as a solo one. Wes Craven's New Nightmare, definitely a popcorn. I'm only putting it lower because, like, you need the first one. This one is so referential in its, like, creation and the script and the fact that, like, you need to know what Wes Craven looks like to recognize that some of the scenes he's there talking to Heather. Because half the time, right, there's scenes in this movie where like Wes Craven is there talking to Heather, but like they don't say each other's name. Or like Shay, I think, is there, or like the actors are there and they assume that because you are a fan of these movies that you know what they are as actors and who they look like even behind the scenes, because there are producers and directors and like clearly behind the scenes up like higher ups who are playing themselves, and it is so jarring to show this movie to people who don't know who they are. And I had to be like, oh, that's so and so, they're playing themselves, and them look at me and be like, what the fuck. Like Low key Kruger fan, still fun. High key Kruger fan, very fun. Uh Overall, very fun. Oh, I fucking the end of this movie also says Freddy's dead, and I was like, ah, so we're rolling the credits with the name of the title, roll credits meme. Like, fucking great joke, but also what the fuck? I think. Oh, I did want to touch on because of the fact that all the kids were dead. The scene that really made me like sell it for me of like why this was so good is when they first arrive in Springwood. um it's like a town fair, and it's like set up as if there would be kids, but there's no children, and so you see like adults like kind of in denial that there's no kids doing stuff they would with children. And the second an older lady sees a child, she's like, I'll take you home. And her husband is like visibly trying to pull her away and stop her. And like, I think even if like I think for some people it can be seen as played as a joke, but like the fact that they're willing to show the like the true mental anguish in a somewhat joking way, somewhat serious way of the way the toll of these people clearly have not been allowed to raise and love children when they want to and so desperately wanted to, and how it's kind of made all these people go insane is very, very cool. Is and so I just that's part of why I recommend it, especially because it's very clearly not the same direction as the other movies. It's a very fun alternate look at what Krueger could have been as a killer and how he could be approached, which I think is neat. Um, but I think that's enough about me gushing about six. I think six for me was the like surprise hitter. Six was definitely in my line of the movies that I like. I don't watch sixes often, and I was like, oh, I'm sure it'll just be okay. And then six ended up being way, way better than I thought it was. Which one do I want to do next though? Do I want to hurt myself or do I want to have a fun one? I feel like we should talk about. I know I'm talking about Dream Warriors in the wrong order. I don't want to have a conversation about that. Um I'm just trying to decide. I guess the issue is that you can't really talk about 5 without talking about 4 because that's when I okay. I will talk about 4 first because 4 kind of starts the train wreck and then 5 it's okay. For context, Dream Warriors, the GOAT, starts the fucking greatest thing ever with the body horror and the world and the fact that there's these characters that have the strength to like empower themselves in the dream and like the greatness that is the fucking I am the oh god, I my brain is already fried. The Wizard Master, right? Like you have these great premises and ideas of how these characters are going to act in the dream realm. So, Nightmare 4, and this I kind of alluded to this at the very start of the stream, but most of these movies do not have the same director or team or anything, which is why I think watching all of these movies is such a wild trip because you will get the most crazy ass takes. And so, Nightmare 4 is made by a completely different team, and it is it is a ride. And I mean a ride in the sense of like they wanted to have it as a sequel to 4. The problem is that 3 was like Patricia Arquette, the main character, Kirsten. It was her shining moment into the starlight, and she became a big, big actress like right after this movie. So they couldn't get Patricia Arquette back. And the guy who's making this movie goes, "We'll just recast her." How do you recast someone as talented as Patricia Arquette? How? How do you do this? I don't understand. I still, to this day, can't. I I have I don't. I just can't. My brain, even now watching this movie again, and 5, because I I don't understand the direction, but for 4 specifically that has Kristen, what the fuck? Kirsten's character is just not the same character. It's so different. She's just not even the same person. It's it's so weird to like look at 4 and be like, yeah, no, it's still Kirsten, I promise. I promise. Like, Squint, I promise. Like, it's not. I can't. It's so weird. It's so weird. I So she's recast. And then I have to make this very, very clear. It is not Tuesday Night's fault. Like, that poor girl went in and was like, "I'll play in Nightmare on Elm Street," and they were like, "You're filling in for Patricia Arquette, and you're gonna play as Kirsten." And I was like, I think all of us would shit our pants if that was the request, right? When you watch 3 and you see how good she did, and you're like, "So you're gonna try and do what she did, but also I want you to act differently." Oh. I also There's also quotes from the director who has stated that he wanted the leads to be what's the word? Timid and vulnerable. I believe these comments upon further research, because these quotes were a little bit taken out of place when looking at people complaining about this movie, were more referring to the actress who played Alice and the way Alice is portrayed in 4. And I understand people's issues with Alice. I'm going to go into my complaints of Alice and this movie later. It's just, speaking of the way Kirsten is portrayed, oh boy. Um, the main thing I have to say is that you get a new actress, she can't 100% play it. She did her best, and like, it's just, that's the way the cookie fucking crumbled, and I'm just sad. Like, I almost just wish they didn't I wish that Kirsten wasn't back. Like, I get why they wanted Kirsten as a character, but like, she's so different as a character from what she was. And it was really odd to see her and think she was the character we saw in 3. Um, but she's not the only returning character. So, Kincaid, and I believe his name is Joey. Uh we have basically the boy who struggled, who was mute, who then figures out how to talk in the end of 3. Um those two also return with Kirsten in 4. And the entire premise of 4 is that apparently the burying of Kruger's bones and holy water and like sending his like physical form to rest is not enough to defeat him. And because of that, the 3 of which is Kirsten and Joey and Kincaid are the last of the Elm kids, in the sense of why I said 6 is an alternate universe, because those 3 in the canon of the main movie franchise we know as the last of the Elm kids. And the reason Kirsten is brought back is because she had the power to pull people into her dreams. And after Kincaid and Joey are killed, she pulled Alice into her dream. Alice is the actual main character because when Kirsten is killed, she gets Kirsten's power to pull people into her dreams, and the entire premise of 4 is Alice trying to find a way to not like pull people into her dreams to give them as like s- sacrifices basically to Kruger, which is unique as a premise. It's the part that's weird in the sense of the way this movie kind of presents it is that basically uh the first thing I'm gonna start at the beginning before that like the previous characters die. there there is a scene of like Kincaid's dog being in the junkyard from the previous movie where Kruger is buried, and he pisses fire over where Kruger is buried, and I was just like, "We have a fire pissing dog, and you didn't use that to fight Kruger." And I know this isn't the dream sequence, but I was cackling at the like fire pissing dog because it's Kincaid's dog, and like, oh, it was so funny to me that that was like something that happened, and then there was also the like when Joey, the mute kid, is in his dream sequence, which I have to say, that to me, if you're gonna reference the bed thing that happens in the first movie, if you're gonna reference Johnny Depp's death ever, oh my god, this movie does the best way ever. So he's on a waterbed, right? And he falls asleep. And he feels his waterbed suddenly moving. And he's like, what's going on in the waterbed? And he takes all the covers off of it. And he finds this super hot naked woman swimming in the waterbed. And he's like, whoa, she's so hot. And he's like trying to figure out if he can get to her. And Kruger pulls him into the waterbed and kills him under the water, right? And there's blood now everywhere. And you get this really cool shot of the basically the waterbed is now filled with blood. So you basically get the opposite shot that you had from the first movie where the waterbed is now filled with blood, and then his mom comes to look for him, and she uncovers the bed, and there's no blood, and Joey's just drowned in the waterbed. And there was such a good use of you wanted to reference an older movie and the way they died, but not 100% replicate the scene. And I was like, good job, good on you. This is exactly how you do it, and you're paying your respects, and you're not fucking like one for one doing the scene. Like, good job. Like, I was so proud of them for like having the respect and like not 100% taking it for scene. Honestly, uh it's not the like coolest death, but I think it's the most tasteful death. I definitely like I have a lot of like I think it's a lot of fun, that one. Cuz if we're gonna talk about like the coolest death, we can't we can't ignore the fact that this is a body horror, and there is a scene where Alice's friend Debbie, who is the hot biker 80s chick who it works out and hates bugs, Kruger, I believe it has to is I have to double check. It is this one, right? It's not the next one. I think yeah, okay. It is this one. Yeah. So I have to remember because the issue is with this and 5, Alice is in both. And so my brain goes, "Ah, yes. Alice is in both." And so Alice can like cause like the people who die in these movies, it could be either. But like no, I'm pretty confident that because Alice is in this one has Debbie, and Debbie the is the one who dies in what I think is one of the greatest deaths. Uh but I have to double check because now I'm having the like, is Debbie in 5? Am I thinking of the wrong cool death? Because if it's the other movie, I need to save Debbie for that one. come on. Is Debbie in the other one? Am I thinking of the wrong character? Her. God damn, I'm confident it's. Okay, am I thinking of the right character? Did I just say the wrong name? Am I insane? Have I officially had the brain rot of watching these movies too many times in a row? No, I know this character. I'm even looking at the cast and crew and it didn't show the name. Okay, yeah, I'm right. It is Debbie, and she is in 4, and the cast and crew lied to me. How dare? How dare? Okay, so Debbie in 4 has the coolest fucking death, and I can't believe I was lied to by the cast and crew here. Which is that she is a workout bunny that loves to dress in leather, and she fucking is terrified of bugs, and Kruger fucking breaks her arms while she's working out, and she starts turning into a cockroach, like something out of the Fly, and traps her in a, like, fly trap and then squishes her like a bug. And it's so to all of my body horror fans, this scene was the shit. Oh my god, this was so cool to see her arms come out as the, like, cockroach arms and her slowly, like, lose her skin and become more and more of a bug. Oh my god, fantastic body horror. Like, this clearly was following the call to arms of body horror from the previous movie. Um my like tiniest gripe that I mainly have with this movie has to do with the fact that, like, Alice is like, okay, how do I phrase this? So Kruger, when he kills them, it's explicitly said multiple times that he's absorbing the soul of the kills. And Alice is absorbing their power. But Alice is, like, changing and explicitly becoming more and more like her friends that are dying throughout the movie. And so I feel like that shouldn't be happening. Not in the sense of, like, oh, she's, like, power of friendship or whatever, because I don't care. If you want to do power of friendship, that's fine. But it's more of, like, now you're gonna have people questioning what counts as their power and what counts as the soul, and I feel like that's just not a question you should be having in your dumb, like, what most people would consider a dumb slasher movie. Cause, like, I feel like if your movie is like, I am gaining their powers, like, my brother died and he did kung fu, so I'm gaining kung fu, that's fine. But I don't feel like that means I should be gaining his mannerisms, because that's not part of his power, and Kruger is getting his soul. Like, there should be a real obvious line. Like, not even me trying to be mean, like, that is, you show, like, it shows Kruger, I believe it's this one, eating a pizza with their faces, like, in the sausage, like, because he has their souls. And I guess, like, we could have the argument of, oh, maybe the part of their soul is with the power, and that's why she's gaining some of their little personality quirks. And I'm just like, it's still weird that when she gets Kirsten's soul, she started getting the habit of smoking, or, like, that feels like she's getting more than the power, and it was like, we're really holding on to that, huh? Cause I'm fine if we want to call it the power of friendship, just call it the power of friendship. Like, I'm down. We, like, the previous one is Dream Warriors, and now we have the power of friendship. Like, I'm all about the shits and giggles with these movies. We've got a goofy guy who says one-liners while he kills us. Like, you can't take the fun out of this movie for me. Just don't blur the lines of what's Kruger's and what's Alice's, because that's what's gonna confuse me while I watch them. I overthink, and I don't want to overthink about the boring stuff. I want to overthink the fun stuff, like, how is, Like, I think it's way funnier to overthink, like, in 4, there's a scene where she falls asleep in the movie theater, and, she gets sucked into the movie, and everyone else in the audience starts clapping, and that's when she fights Krueger, and, like, he starts eating their souls off the pizza, and, like, great, great, but the rest of my brain goes, "So she fell asleep in that movie theater, and, like, what? So when that movie ends, are they just gonna leave her there? Like, to me, I love the comedy of in the sense of the nightmare movies of when people fall asleep in places that other people could notice. The comedy aspect to me after seeing these movies is the amount of times I have of like, so are these assholes just gonna leave her? Like, you know what I mean? Or like, how the fuck does, like, someone fall asleep? Like, I know the joke is you can fall asleep at the road, but, like, when one of the movies presents that you can fall asleep multiple times while driving, and I'm just like, "Bitch, you didn't think to pull over? You clearly were not once, not twice, but, like, multiple times." And this is multiple movies that have done this. Like, Wes Craven's New Nightmare pulls it, 5 pulls it. Like, apparently driving and sleeping is such a hazard that I don't understand. But that's just because I think we have these things called coffee and the ability to pull over. But like, if you have this problem, uh, the fact that you would try and drive through it, I find so comical. But like, I know in the Kruger world, Kruger can make you think that you're not actually asleep when you fell asleep on the first one. But it's just, I love the funniness of like, ah, yes, I, I can, I'm asleep in like a diner, and people are just gonna let me take this table for 3 hours and not move me, or I have fallen asleep in a grocery store, and like the people who work there are just like, I'm not paid enough to fucking deal with this. Is to me, it's like the peak comedy behind the horror of these movies when you realize where they must have fallen asleep to make the scene happen. Is so good for me. Um but anyway, back on focus. Uh for um for 4, um the main, so Alice has a love interest, and his love interest is named Dan. And I feel for Dan so bad, cuz apparently Dan's not actually from Springwood. He moved here, and he has one of the funniest lines that he says, which is, out of all the towns in America, and I got to move to the Bermuda Triangle. And I was like, dude, you have the shittest luck. Like, how did you, dude, that sucks, man. You moved here? You you had the choice and you picked this town? Fuck, your parents are terrible at research. Like, I feel like even when they try to hide the fact that it's Kruger, right? You can't hide the number of deaths, and your parents still picked to this town? Your parents must hate you, dude. Like, what the fuck? Um, so yeah, I will say she does kind of beat them with the power of friendship. Like, she gets to the dream realm, and she has the powers of all of her friends from absorbing their powers. But she when she beats him, uh this has the coolest Kruger death by a lot, which is that all the souls that are inside of him try to break out of his physical form. So you have all the like hands and the faces, and like they're trying to reach out of him, and like he gets pinned to like a grate or a wall or something that's behind him by these like hands that are trying to break out of him, which is implied to be the souls inside of him. And like they're trying to break out of him, and then one of them grabs up from his chest to his mouth and breaks his own jaw, and that's how it like releases the souls. But the body horror of his own body being broken by all these souls trapped inside of him is So cool, and I think of all the Nightmare movies is by far the most interesting way he's died. Um by a lot. And the reason he dies this way is because of the Dream Master lullaby about evil seeing its own reflection. And I don't care as much about that. I just care about the fact that they used body horror in the sense of like doubling down on the fact that like, ah, yes, you could see the soul's faces in the last movie on his stomach. And so they doubled down on that and they went, well, the soul's got to be able to break out of him because that's way more interesting. And it was, and it's so cool. Oh my god. So yeah. For me, this movie is 10 out of 10 with the body horror. Um and I'm really happy they brought back some of the actors and actresses from mainly the actors. I do still feel bad about the actress who had to try and play Kirsten. It's not Kirsten. Um, I have mixed feelings about the way Alice is used because Alice is like this very timid character and then it feels like she's rushed into being this badass through not her own making but because the power of friendship and her friends being inside of her because Kruger kills them and so she absorbs their strength and that suddenly makes her like this confident character instead of natural character growth. Um, but I think the other characters make up for the lack of concrete strength in Alice. And I have to say, we were way spoiled for how good Nancy and Kirsten were as female leads. Holy shit. Like for 80s movies, and I'm going to keep saying on it cough cough fucking goddamn Ripley holy fucking shit. We had some fucking great female leads in the 80s and I am so like shocked that they're still so like I can continue to enjoy my 80s movies and enjoy like my strong female leads cuz Kirsten and Nancy and like Ripley all were great female leads. So I think for me this movie I'm so torn. I think a lot of this movie is still really well done. Do I want to put it in Nightmare or do I want to put it in Popcorn? I Okay. Do I think it's better than Freddy's Dead? Would I watch it? I wouldn't watch it over Freddy's Dead. I have to like would I want I'm like so torn because as a movie, I don't think I'd watch it over Freddy's Dead. But the kills in it are so cool. Uh okay. I will I'm going to put it in Popcorn. But I'm going to put these two as a like dealer's choice, I think. Cuz arguably like I need to think for a second. Oh, I'm so torn on this. No, I do. I think I would watch Freddy's Dead over Nightmare 4. Like the kills in it are so cool. Okay, I let me I did really love the side cast. Like Debbie and Sheila and Dan were all such good characters and they're actually in the movie for a really long time. Is that enough? Because the characters in Freddy's Dead are like stereotypical 90s like meme. Okay. I think what I'm actually going to do, I think it goes here. I think the kills in this are so much higher quality and the side characters are much better thought out and the storyline is even if I think the execution of the characters are not like quite there, I think it does deserve like obviously this is like, these two are in a tier of their own, but I'm just not going to make the physical tier. I think I could understand people thinking that this is the same tier, which is why I think it gets to go up the little bit higher. Like, because the kills in this movie are very much the same quality as these two, which is why I think it deserves to be in this tier. Like, that alone, I think the only thing this movie is missing in comparison to these two is the female lead, which I think is why most people probably put it a tier lower. I think the rest of this movie is the same league of this, though. And I think if you enjoy the more timid female leads coming into their own, this movie could be seen in the same league. I don't like that, and also I think there's room to critique that it didn't do that well. Um, but I think that that is like something that could be argued. I think some people might argue it was done well. I'd love to have that conversation. I just don't know. Like, the issue is the whole power soul absorption thing, like where the argument of like how much of that influenced her character in her fucking growth in this movie. Cause that's my issue of like why I was like, I don't know if I can put it in the high tier. If she had that growth on her own, if she had the growth of like, I became strong because Kruger is killing my friends and I'm watching it happen and I'm seeing it and it like I could totally understand why it's up there. But like the problem is like you start seeing her take on the traits of her friends, and that's where I like it becomes a little gray area for me. So this is definitely the lowest of the high tier, and maybe when I close ranks I might lower it again. But for now, I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna leave it right there. No, I wanna. Okay, I am gonna talk about this first because I have I have so many things. I have the things I have to say about this movie. I think might be the one that get me in the most trouble. Not because I think it's bad, but I think the Freddy Krueger community have thoughts, and I am going to spill tea on those thoughts. So I'm going to talk about this one. Um, so I'm gonna do my preemptive not for me take before I get into this one because Dream Warriors 5 is another sequel in the Dream Warriors franchise, which is why I was calling it the trilogy. Alice and Dan are the survivors in 4. Spoilers alert for like the entire stream, but like they're the survivors in 4. In 5, Alice and Dan are shown in the opening credits having what can only be described as a very cinematic hanky panky time. Um, like it, and then Alice goes to take a shower, and she has a nightmare. And she's concerned that Kruger's back, even though she defeated Kruger in the previous movie. And I would say, as a positive, this is a not terrible approach. But uh I'm gonna just make a wild statement that this I'm just gonna say it straight out. This movie, like, very clearly was trying to push a weird message, and I'm gonna explain that as we go. And it is hard because I am someone who's watched a lot of horror movies, and I've even watched a lot of movies that like try to use some of the things in this movie not the way it was used in this one. And it's kind of hard to ignore the message this movie was trying to push. To start with, I'm just gonna get this out of the way. This movie is called this one's The Dream Child. So be A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. If that does not spoil what this movie is about, I don't know how else to explain it. Alice is pregnant, And Alice doesn't know she's pregnant. And we waste a good solid, like, 45 minutes with Alice not knowing she's pregnant. And Kruger's plan is that he's using the child's dreams to get to everyone because he can't use Alice's dreams to get everyone. But because Alice is pregnant, he can. And I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. My issue with this is about the fact that it is directly stated in the movie by the, like, movie doctor that, like, she is so early on in her pregnancy that she, like, isn't even, like, supposed to have an ultrasound yet. But we're supposed to believe that the child is having fully fleshed out dreams that are strong enough for Kruger to use. And I'm going to, for the context of my audience and the audience that would be interested in this, I am going to be polite to everyone and use the language this movie uses, which means I'm going to refer to it as a child because the movie constantly refers to what is maybe a week or 2 week fetus as a child. It is referred to as a child and as a baby the entire movie. And so the baby is not even like 2 weeks. Like, we see them consummate at the start, and then the dream shit starts happening very early on, and then we know that it has to be before you would expect an ultrasound. She's not showing, like, this is so early on in her pregnancy that it is not, like, it is unspeakable of why she would even go to see her prenatal doctor yet. And I have to say again, I am not trying to yuck anyone's yum. If you believe the baby can form dreams of that strength, good on you. I hope that you found that part fun. I struggled immensely with this part of the movie, especially because there is a scene where um she is with her friends, and this is after Dan is killed, and she is like, something is different. Kruger is trying to get to us, and he can only do it through my dreams. I don't know how he's doing it. Her friend, who's super into comic books, by the way, that's like the only trait I remember about him, goes, "Congrats, you're pregnant." And she just repeats the same line. I was like, I don't know, Alice. Literally, something has changed. I wonder what it could be. You stupid bitch. It's almost like everyone now in this scene has told you you're pregnant. Like, are you fucking joking? It was like this movie wanted you to think like I did and then tell you you're stupid, but then also treated the main character who thought like the movie does stupid. And I was frustrated because it was like, Alice in this movie uh is also kind of like really, I don't know how to describe it. She suddenly become like, a lot of the characters suddenly become different from the first movie. And again, I'm going to point out it's another fully new team behind the scenes, new director and stuff. Uh so like the dad in 4, who is Alice's dad, was an alcoholic. In 5, he's suddenly sober and like it's like he's going to A&A and he's only allowed to be a part of the family if he stays sober. Dan, apparently this wasn't established in the first like 4. I never saw it in 4. I kept looking for it, but apparently in 5 it's now established that he doesn't drink and is a hardcore Christian. And I was like, okay. Um it has very obvious like religious preaching in this movie. Um and it feels like they took the fact that in 3 it was hinted at that Amanda Kruger became a nun, or at least was shown as a nun in her old age, and decided, so we could, if we wanted to, take a very religious element or element like religious tone with this movie. And they took that with this one, and I feel like it went really really far. Um because there's a scene where she gets the ultrasound and she's like talking with, or like looking at her fetus. I'm sorry, she's looking at the baby, and like the baby is like the really tiny, like almost the stuff you see on the pro life like protest signs. And Kruger is feeding this thing the souls of her dead friends, and it's, I don't want to say that it's not out of place, because I'm okay with movies having these conversations, but it, my issue is when it's not an unbiased one. Because when the option comes up of like a friend asking, "Hey, you know the entire movie plot would be over if you had an option," and the option becomes no, and it's not a conversation, um which is fine, and she does give an okay reason for that, but then immediately afterwards it felt very dismissive because Dan's parents come and don't think she would be a good mother because she'd be insane, because the hospital called them and told them that she was being insane. I was like, how? Why? What the fuck are you doing? Like, it's one thing to have a very like semi-religious tone, somewhat pro-lifey message, right? That's fine. There are plenty of horror movies that are somewhat religious in tone. Like every haunting horror movie usually picks Christianity as the basis, and if you want to find ones that aren't in that basis, you got to look for different like, you got to look for it for other countries' horror movies. Like there are tons and tons of other ones that will do non-Christian basis, or like the demon itself has to be of a non like Catholicism basis. And if that's what you're looking for, you can find it and they're super cool and I recommend it. So like I'm not bothered by the fact that it's like Catholic based. I'm just bothered that we are like, it just went really heavy on this like, we want like, suddenly all the like good kids and the kids that were living from the previous movie, they were actually always from good homes and good girl, like her dad suddenly being this righteous like non-alcoholic was weird, and like we didn't see this ultimatum like made in the previous movie. The boyfriend suddenly being like from a, I won't say a good home, because obviously like the pressure of being like the sports star is real, and being forced to like potentially not do what you want to follow in the success being presented, even if you don't want to, because your parents have set you up for that, right? Very real. But like the Christian non-alcoholic, like would never drink, I am the goodest boy suddenly, when in the previous movie he was just a jock. Like, and his best friend was Alice's brother who came from hard times. Like, it wasn't presented in the same sense of like he didn't do things. It was just that like he was busy because of all the sports things, and like his best friend like had an alcoholic as a dad. That doesn't suddenly make, no, I'm Christian, I'd never drink. Like I don't know. It felt like it was too focused on selling its message than like keeping to what the original Kruger story was all about. And it, I don't know. This movie is, I'm not going to call it icky, because I definitely can see people who aren't as bothered by it, but it is so not for me that like I almost want to put it for icky because I feel I personally have an issue where if you're inserting messages, I don't care if it's religious or political or whatever, but if you're inserting your ideological message to the point that it overtakes the movie like so heavily, it's not like great. I it's not a fun time. Like, I don't know. It got really hard to ignore. Also, Kruger is portrayed as an ugly fetus baby thing, and I'm bothered immensely because we know canonically he was a normal guy and then like became disfigured because the parents burned him alive, and they just decided to throw that shit out the window and make the nun give birth to a horrific monster fetus, and that became Kruger. And then they damned the nun to take the fetus back into her womb to trap Kruger in the end. I was like, okay, no, you are some fucked up kind of creep. What the fuck is wrong with you? No. Oh, I don't want to say double hell, but like, what the fuck? Like, yeah, it's like you saw the fact that you had access to a nun and you wanted to do weird shit. Like, weird shit. It's just not as icky. It's not as not for me, not as icky. Oh, but I will talk about the positives because there are more positives than Freddy v Jason because it is okay, because it's a Freddy movie and people usually know what the fuck they're doing in Freddy movies. The people behind the kills and the like dream sequence knew what the fuck they were doing, at least. Even if this movie is not for me. So, as I mentioned, there is a character in this movie who is he's into comic books and he's terrified of blood. And all the sequences of this character entering the dream is so cool. And he by far had the coolest dream sequences in the entire movie by a lot. If you've seen Take On Me, Aha's music video, they are all very similarly stylized, where it enters this like he'll be in the real world and then suddenly he'll get into this like black and white, he becomes drawn and then enters the comic book, and then they're in a black and white drawn sequence, and it's so cool and it's so fascinating to watch. And he's the only character that actually keeps the part of Dream Warriors that was fun because he was into comic books. He has a character from the comic books that he was drawing that empowers him, and he actually tries to fight Kruger in the dreams. And I kind of just wish that they kept that part from Dream Warriors for this trilogy instead of whatever this weird fucked up Alice shit they ended up doing in 5. Like, it was so fun to have this black and white sequence, and then Kruger turns himself into this big badass villain character in a comic book style, and then he cuts him up into another, like, he's in 3D in black and white, he cuts the other up guy into paper, and he turns into paper shreds. Honestly, it is such a cool animation effect to watch, where it changes from the art style to the 3D on 2D, and all of it's done in this black and white effect. Even if you don't watch the movie, arguably watching just that death scene is well worth it. I just wish it wasn't in this movie. Because this movie is I don't know. Like, if you can get past the weird hyperfixation on the baby, um like, maybe. Oh, I forgot the worst part. The baby talks. The baby's soul is in the dream realm and is portrayed as like a 10, 11-year-old child, and it knows its own name even though it does hasn't been named yet by the mother. So it basically names itself, and I hate that. I can't get over how much it bothers me about that. Like I'm so sorry. I can't. Like it it's it, there are multiple scenes where her own baby is talking to her in the dream realm and tells her its name, and like it's so weird. By far of the movies, I just can't get over that. Like, I think that for me, it's the difference between believing in souls and then believing that your entire life is dictated by the soul, and that your like entire existence and like name and shit is predetermined by the soul. And which is why for me, this movie is not for me. I really disliked that her child was already named Jacob, and it was shown at an age, and like she didn't get to name her child. Like it I it's really jarring to have that understanding in the movie, that like the child tells her its name, and that like she she has the like, I really like that name, and you realize later, oh, it's the child's name is Jacob. And ever like her friend looks at her and goes, wait, you already named the child that like you can't even know. Like, for context, the friends are like, how could you have named the child already? You can't even know its gender yet because it's too small to show up in an ultrasound. That is how jarring everyone else in the movie is acting about the naming of the child when she says it. Not including me, who's freaking out about the fact that this is the soul of the child being portrayed way older, which like ignores the fact that like the child has not experienced living on our plane yet, which like fuck if you believe in souls or not. Like, the child would experience things on our plane which would change the way it presents itself to its own mother. Like, I'm just so bothered the fact that this person who directed this movie was like, we have no issues presenting the soul of an unborn child as an older child to the mother. I God, I hate that about this movie. It's so weird, and it's such a weird stance, and it's clearly trying to have an agenda, and I can't. Oh. Um okay, I'm sorry. I need to talk about the positives cuz again, it still has cool things that I wanted to talk about. And I need to get past the weirdness before I get lost in the sauce again. I need to show. So the other thing is that Dan is the father, and the one thing I forgot to mention, and it's kind of exclusively done in 4 and 5, is that they get caught in little mini like time loops. Like, Kruger intentionally does these time loops of like, you fell asleep. Like, in 4, the best example is they fell asleep in the car. And so a good example is in real life is that if you fall asleep somewhere, sometimes you'll like remember of like, I was doing something but I don't remember like if I got to that place or not. And then when you wake up, you'll realize, oh, I got to my bed, I just didn't remember it because I fell asleep. And so in 4, the great scene that they played with that is that Alice and Dan were trying to help Debbie because they knew that Debbie was the next target. And so they keep replaying this loop of like, we got to get into the truck and we have to get to Debbie, we got to help her. And they replay the loop like 4 times, and then they realize that they've said or done the same thing over and over again, and it's because they've played the same loop. And so, they realize they must have fallen asleep in the truck, and it also means they don't know if they fell asleep while driving or not, which is part of why I think 4 is really like deserves to be in here, because they really they really play on how people remember falling asleep and how they remember if they're asleep or not, how they remember how things function. It's a really cool like part of the like way sleep functions that they play around with, and I think it's well done in 4. In 5, on the other hand, with Dan, they because the characters are awake, the sleep is done by the child. And so characters are being fucked with by Kruger while they're awake. And so instead, you're just having lapses in time because the character that's actually asleep is the baby. But like the baby's maybe a week old, and I question. Anyway, the cool scene is that Dan wants to try and return to Alice because Alice tells him that she's missing lapses of time very similarly to when Kruger was there, and so she's concerned. And he is having the like repeat effect of like he thought he leaves and he can't, but it's when he's driving his truck. And so the really cool death for him is that he's driving his truck and he thinks he got hit by a truck, and he doesn't. But because he was trapped in a partial dream because the baby was asleep, he's missing his car keys and he's hurt. And so instead, he gets on a motorcycle. And this scene is so funny to me because of the body horror part where Kruger becomes a motorcycle. And I just need you to know that this face and having Robert Englund's voice come out of it and like trying to be intimidating while the rest of the motorcycle is merging into him is both so funny and also horrifying at the same time because like Dan's face is like partway in the scene, his face starts like melting off and like his feet are merging into the motorcycle, like where his feet rest, and his hands have already become one with like the ignition and stuff. But like Kruger is just making fucking one line quips as like the motorcycle, and I'm just like, yeah, this is perfectly fine. I don't see anything wrong with this. Like, I've already seen him be a TV. This totally feels like the natural evolution of what Kruger could have become. Like, the people who are behind the, like, evolution of what Kruger can turn into, they truly knew what the fuck they were doing. I stand behind these people 100%. I'm always, like, clearly they knew what they were doing. I love it. I also love that like it can change like during the movie it can change its facial features and stuff. So hearing like Kruger laugh and stuff in this is so funny. It is by far like the I think it's one of the more like of the mechanical body horror. I think this was one of the more creative ones done in all of the franchise. That the motorcycle and having the face like animate and stuff. It was very fun. I just wish it was done in one of a more okay, in a less preachy movie. Um so I think for the other thing to note is that they canonized that Amanda Kruger was a nun when the consummation of Freddy happened, which like I feel is unnecessary. I feel like I get it because the whole point is about the babies and stuff. Like I get why they wanted to like include it. Like it's literally the start of the movie. I just don't I feel like in 3 when they talk about the like because it's talked about in 3. They don't show anything. It's a nun talking about what you think at the time as a coworker and about how horrific it was and about like how she was trapped there and like how it almost killed her. And then you realize at the end of the movie that that nun was her. I feel like it had more impact than the like showing the scene of these like 100 quote unquote lunatics locked up in an asylum and a nun being trapped in there and then fading to black. And I realized they just wanted to have the nun exist because of how they wanted to defeat Krueger. It felt like more of to add on to the religious pretext of this film of we want to talk about keeping the babies no matter the whatever, even if it could save your life, which is where I was starting to have an issue because like the entire plot of this movie would have flopped if Alice decided to not keep the child. And I think that is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of fans of this movie, right? Like, yes, I can accept that Alice loved Dan and wanted to like keep the child. I think it's just hard when like your entire premise of the film has to survive on the fact that she is willing to die to keep the child. I feel like you need to have a stronger grip than that, and to add the extra religious subtext and to add the nun and to add the like she was willing to keep the baby even though when Krueger was born he was this disgusting ugly monster that everyone was saying was against God is one against the premise of all the other movies and also really rude and gross, right? Like you shouldn't do that, especially if you're trying to talk about the like very sensitive topic of like people and whether they want to have children and if keep their child, and it wanted to talk about a subject and I don't feel like it handled it well, and the idea that Krueger is a monster and was a monster from birth is not fair to the premise that all the movies presented, right? Especially because of the other movies handling that subject. Like I talked about 6 earlier and about Krueger stating in a moment with just his daughter that that everywhere has an Elm Street. I think handles why I find this movie so problematic, because the whole point is that yes, Krueger was found by the parents and is now labeled a monster. But that doesn't change the fact that on some other quote unquote Elm Street, there could be a monster that just hasn't been found yet. But that doesn't mean that he was always some obvious comical monster. And so 5 to be like his existence was always against God and he's a comical like disgusting monster and he was disfigured from the start at birth, when like that was never the point and that was never the intent. And it feels like the director did not care about the source material and cared more about sending this religious undertone, and I personally find that distasteful. Not icky, cuz like icky is its own, but like it's not enjoyable for a movie experience when you're trying to enjoy the fun that is supposed to be a Krueger movie experience. But I will now move on to what I would say most people find to be hot takes. This is just hot takes. In 2010, Wes Craven, who finally now had the rights to Nightmare, decided to allow for the attempt of a remake. And I have so many feelings about this. I have lots of feelings. Because for my DVD fans, you know this movie because this Krueger and Quentin from this movie are in Dead by Daylight. And not Robert Englund or Nancy or any of the characters from any of the other movies. Um, I This movie was hated so much when it came out. And I I have so many feelings about this movie, and I think so many people. I'm gonna say this first. I think this movie had a lot against it because it is a remake of a beloved franchise, and on top of that, it was backed and done by Michael Bay and Michael Bay's production studio. And for those of you who don't understand why I'm saying that is bad, it is because Kruger and the Kruger franchise is usually better when there is some subtlety and some care. And Michael Bay is none of those things. And that is me trying to say it the kindest way. But those of you who've lived on the internet forever probably know the fucking rap battle meme of that he just loves money and he doesn't give a fuck about anyone or anything that he destroys because he just will add explosions to fucking everything. So when I say that I blame a lot of what happened to this movie on Michael Bay. Um, I blame a lot of what happened to this movie on Michael Bay. Like, they, I, I don't entirely think it's his fault. I just think that when you look at this movie critically, you can definitely see from where production decided to make things way more obvious than they needed to be, and it ruined the ideas, and I hate it. Uh, so for context, this is a full remake, full reboot. Kruger is fully recast. Nancy is in this movie, but she is a completely new character. Nancy is not the same as she is in one. And that is fine. I was not like, as someone who loved this and I saw this movie in theaters when it came out, I was never expecting these two characters to be the same as the originals. I think the idea that they would cast Robert Englund would be silly because you can't have a full remake and like do new things with Kruger if you're relying on the old cast and the old full 100% ideas. But also, Wes Craven was the one who gave them the access. So I knew going in that this wasn't gonna be the like Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, this was not gonna be Dream Warrior stuff. This was gonna be more Wes Craven's 1 in 7 inspired Kruger. Potentially more of the stuff he talked about in his Never Sleep Again Elm Street Legacy about the stuff he wanted to do but couldn't because of the satanic panic stuff going on in the 80s. And it turns out that I was right. Uh it was intentionally darker, and he's not just called a child murderer, and he is directly portrayed as child SA in this movie. And I think a lot of people were not prepared for that, which I'm surprised by because in 5 he is directly called out as that, and there in almost every other movie it's very heavily implied. Like, not even a little. It's like like it is a fact of Kruger that even if they don't directly say it, it is so heavily implied in almost all of his movies that like I am surprised that you could ignore it. Um and I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that like if you've seen every Kruger movie, it would be hard to ignore that as part of his character. Especially the fact that the adult or like very older teenage women always end up in young teenage nightgowns, and every single scene that happens with them implying sexual content, even if it's not explicit. it was the very 80s, 90s polite way of saying of like things may have happened. And Wes Craven has gone on to mention further that he was willing to go farther and didn't. And it is just it is a part of his character that we have to accept was always there most of the time and did not become explicit until later. And I know that in the 2010 remake, it was made very explicit. And I know that a lot of fans at the time were not pleased, and it became a problem. And for that group of the fans, I'm sorry. Um, not I don't know how else to like cope with that. If that part bothered you, I don't think you and I watched the same movie. Mainly because I don't know how you got through all these movies and didn't notice it. Uh, but I'm glad you enjoyed them anyway, I guess. And that just means that this movie that I'm talking about is not for you. Uh, I just don't think it makes it bad for being explicit about it. Because Wes Craven always wanted it to be darker and more explicit. And, like, had the Satanic Panic not happened when it did, the original movie I was intended to have it. They just took it out of the original script. So, like, I feel like this movie having it in there and having the explicitness of the acts that Kruger did and his like it doesn't and for context it doesn't show it directly. It just like it shows him interacting with the cast as preschoolers and it shows him and this is parts of the movie that I think are really good is it shows Kruger when he was alive as a gardener being not only loved by the preschool but like the parents couldn't believe that he could have done this, but then the kids started saying things and it leads to the events of him being burned and you see it in the dreams from Kruger's perspective, which causes the main cast to think that they framed him. And it's such a well done portrayal of because they constantly were hiding this from the children because they didn't want the children to remember all the bad things that happened to them as kids, which is one, very realistic, very expected, very understandable. This terrible person took advantage of their dreams and then wanted them to remember, and so took the fact that it was a false narrative to make them think that they, as children, framed him. And I think a lot of people who watched this movie expecting the old movies don't give it credit for the parts of it I think it did good. And I'm going to make this very clear. This movie is not going up here. It still does not hold a can to these. I'm just saying it's not the worst of the Nightmare franchise. I think if anyone thinks this is the worst of the Nightmare franchise does not like it's not. It's just not. Like it doesn't have I it's just not I'm sorry. It's just not that bad. It's for me, this movie is a good popcorn movie. It is the definition of if you want Kruger, but you want Kruger darker, this is your popcorn movie. And I say that with all the love of my heart to my Kruger fans because it some of the kills are referential to the first one, and some of them are referential in a hilariously bad way. Like when I think her name is Chris dies in her bedroom the same way that Tina does in the first one, right? And it's supposed to be the like darker version. It's so comical to watch her like float and bounce against the wall instead of Tina, which was the like very well done and choreographed her being dragged against the walls and her trying to reach out to her boyfriend. And it was like there are definitely scenes in this that I think have criticism, but the overall viewing experience is a very intended, like, if you enjoy darker content, much more like popcorny than this one. Like, if my friends said, "Hey, I want to just watch a dark horror movie for popcorn time," this is probably the one that I would be like, "Okay, sure." Cuz it goes over like a lot of the original lore that Wes Craven would have wanted for Nightmare really well. And it does some of the things from the original movie because it's a remake, not as good as the original, but it does some of them, I think, better. I don't remember his name because obviously some of the characters have the same name and some of them have different names. I think they call him Jesse, which is confusing because Jesse is the name of the guy from the second movie, which is why I'm always confused because they all of the names in this are very referential except for Quentin, and that's why I remember him more because one, DVD, and two, he's the most unique to this movie. But like there's a character who gets arrested just like in movie 1 for the death of Chris, who's the female character who dies in the same way that Tina dies. Uh while he's in jail, he, instead of being choked to death like Ross in the first movie. I've This has been 3 hours. I apologize that now the names are being lost on me. Um in the first movie, the guy in the leather jacket, very very greaser looking motherfucker. We love we he dies and he's choked with the blanket in jail and it looks like he strangled himself. Instead of replicating that death, it's a completely new, unique death experience. And on top of that, the way he enters the dream state is so well done because you can't tell as the audience that he's entered the dream state. And arguably, one of my biggest criticisms about the way this movie is handled is that they're not um consistent about whether you as the audience member are supposed to know or not supposed to know when they enter the dream state. And I wish they had decided on that ahead of time because the jail scene is so well done about you not knowing. He get he A police officer comes up to him in the cell and goes, "Your bail's been posted, let's go." He walks out, and then suddenly he doesn't hear anything. He turns behind him, and a giant white wall is behind him where his jail cell used to be. And he's then suddenly in the boiler room. And it is so good. And at no point do you realize that he must have fallen asleep. Like, because he was sitting in his bed trying to smack his, like, head to stay awake with his hand, and he must have fallen asleep, and that's why the jailer came over and was like, "Hey, your bail's been posted." But you as the audience member didn't know, and that's why that scene is so cool. But in other scenes, they're so fucking obvious when they fell asleep. When the whole point of this movie to make itself unique is this like concept, which is a real concept because we're in the 2000s at this point, and we've done a lot of sleep studies of micro naps. And the idea is that you're awake, but your brain, because it's so tired, forces you to take like mini naps while you're awake. And the movie couldn't decide because of this concept of micronaps if you as the audience member should know or shouldn't know when the micronap is happening. Because sometimes you don't know. Like, and then other times you do. And I was so mad. And I'm going to go into that later because the micronaps are more explored with Nancy and Quentin. But I'm going to instead talk about the positive with this movie, which is that prison scene. The reason I think the prison death is so... Oh? Best viewers... Oh. Well, excuse you. I am perfectly fine, thank you. It's that one. Aha, I fixed the problem. Anyway, back, brain. Train of thought was interrupted. I have the thought, retrieve. The adult grape juice will not stop me from the thought. Okay, we've got it. The reason that the the reason that the jail scene is so cool is because one, Kruger is intimidating to the guy in the to Jesse. Who I'm calling him Jesse. I don't remember if his name is Jesse. You're gonna have to deal with it. This is Jesse number 2. On top of that, he kills Jesse by stabbing him through the heart, and you get to have the power move of him being like, your brain stays alive for 10 minutes after your heart stops beating. We've got 6 more minutes to play. And the fucking absolute horror in his in his victim when he realizes he's now trapped with Kruger because his body has died but his brain is still trapped in the dream realm with Kruger. Like, there is such cool stuff done because we in the modern era now know more about dreams. And I think a lot of the stuff that was done with this movie that's bad is more of just the subtlety is taken out because it was fucking Bay. If Michael Bay wasn't the one who funded it, I think it would have had the subtlety that we're used to in the older Kruger movies. Um, like one of my like back to the micro naps. A good example is that when they're in when Nancy's walking by in the school after they confront Quentin's dad, who's the principal, by the way. Uh Chris's body suddenly shows up in the bloody body bag, which is again another reference to the first movie. Totally fine. I get it. The issue is that that version is done with not a lot of setup to make you think she's entered a micro nap. But when Quentin enters a micro nap at the library, the computer does the computer's entering sleep mode and shows the crows flying off thing. So the movie can't decide if you as the audience are supposed to know or not, if they're entering their micro naps or not. And then also the later in the movie you get, the more they do very obvious light flickering stuff to let you know of ooh, we're entering the dream zone, or ooh, they're fucked up, and getting into weird dream shit. And honestly, I think the best micro nap sequence was done when Nancy's in the hospital and her mom's come to check on her, and the hospital nurse is going to sedate her because she needs to sleep, and she does this oh, you just need a pinch, and suddenly it's Kruger's hand. And it's one of the only times during any of the micro nap sequences between Quentin and Nancy where the audience is given no indication that she's entered a micro nap. And I'm really sad that they didn't stick to that. Because when you're experiencing micro naps, or if you've deprived yourself of sleep, you don't notice it that much. For context, and I don't recommend this, when I was a young rat and I had to do this thing called rat school and go to the learning of being on the screen, uh I had a short moment of not sleeping for many days, and I experienced very similar situations. And I was called out by a fellow rat student who was like, "What the fuck are you doing? Why are you constantly scratching your ears?" And it was because I thought I was wearing my headphones because I was so used to wearing them while I was online. And the idea that you wouldn't you don't notice the slight changes that start occurring to you when you are in the weird micro nap zones. You just think that you're awake. And the fact that they tried to, instead of doubling down on that they think they're awake, and then suddenly weird shit just starts happening, and they can't tell the difference because it's happening in the last thing they saw in the real world, I just feel like is the lost opportunity. Not that the movie itself is a flop, because all the stuff they did with Krueger in like showing him in his past, showing the like tricked background with his parent, with not with the cast parents, I think is actually well done because the whole point is it was done to trick the teens in trusting him and to distrust the parents. I do agree with the criticism though that for some reason all of their parents were good people even though they murdered a guy. Um what the fuck? Like I you don't have to follow like the bread and butter of Wes Craven, but it's kind of weird that there's not even the like we didn't cuz like in the original the reason the parents killed him is cuz he got off on a technicality. In this version they didn't even send him to trial. They decided to just kill him because they didn't want to put their kids through a trial, and the fact that they don't like none of the parents had even a question that he was guilty. They didn't have the like, well, maybe we were wrong. And like that didn't cause a single alcoholic. I have I have questions. Like I don't stand behind that like you can't have creative differences with the same guy because I'm all about new directors and trying new things because Krueger is such a unique killer and you can take a lot of different inspirations with this type of killer. I do have issues with you have a bunch of people who commit a murder and the murder does not have some sort of emotional impact on them afterwards, because especially when like they have no outside confirmation that he was a bad guy. They're trusting the words of like 4 and 5 year olds. That's my like if we're gonna talk about like critiques in the sense, that's my like real criticism that all of these parents were somehow 10, 15 years later upstanding citizens. I just that's like it's like 20 sets of parents. We don't have one drug addict, one alcoholic, one person who felt guilt, who doubted for a second that their 5-year-old maybe made something up. You're telling me we had all parents who all believed their child? Damn. I wish that sounds like a fucking like that sounds like the best world ever where every child is believed immediately by their parents. Holy fuck. Like I don't know. I just like to me that was the most unbelievable part of this movie. I couldn't like that was the part where I was like how did all of you luck out with like your parents all being so well adjusted and believing in you and then willing to commit murder and then still believe in you without like the cops proving you right. Damn. Damn, your parents love you. Holy fuck. um, but yeah, I definitely think the criticisms that are pointed towards the actor who plays Krueger are super not okay and super not fair because I think any actor who attempts to approach the part of Krueger was gonna get shat on. I don't think it would have mattered that it was him. I think it just was gonna matter that it wasn't Robert England. And I think anyone who's doing that is not it's not that's just not cool. Like Robert England can't play Krueger forever. We have to accept that if they're gonna make new movies in this franchise and if they're gonna be exploring potential new ideas, it needs to be a new actor. Um and obviously, because it's a new cast, they decided to put new directions on characters, and that's why Nancy's a new direction. And if you don't like Nancy, and if you don't like the way Nancy was portrayed, totally fair. That's why for me, this is popcorn. This is yummy, yummy food. This is the like, oh, I can have fun with it. And also, it's Michael fucking Bay. I think almost everyone says Michael Bay is like the dumb popcorn movies anyway. It like I just don't know why this movie gets so much shit. Like, it's just so not the worst. It's this movie every time I watch it, I can like it's referential. Some of them are good. Some of them I would argue do it better because I'm sorry, the fact that Krueger has knives and he strangled a guy was like I don't know what Wes Craven was thinking with the prison scene. Like he was so fine causing all sorts of fucked up scenes in all of that movie. Like Johnny Depp in the first movie becomes a giant fountain of blood but the prison guy gets to be a boring strangulation. I love that we took the fact that Krueger gives zero fucks and was like, nah, I'm gonna just fucking put a hole in his chest. And there's nothing you can fucking do about it because you can't prove I'm real. Um, is great. It's great. I love that about this movie. I love that they doubled down that Krueger gives zero fucks. And because it follows on Wes Craven's version, which is that he's supposed to be malicious and he's not as quippy and is supposed to be seen as menacing and dark and evil, and he doesn't have the trench coat. Goddamn! Thank God someone took the trench coat out of Wes Craven's hands. It's it's a good time. And anyone who like, goddamn, I'll never say this is better than any of the originals. I just like it. Okay, let me rephrase. Based on the tier list, I do say it's better than 2 of the originals, but like, I just meant that it's not the worst. I just think it's weird to think this is like the worst one. I would rewatch this one over I would rewatch it. I think it's a fun one to rewatch. And I know that this is probably like the most controversial one to talk about cuz it's not Robert Englund and I love Robert Englund. I'm sad that there's no new movies. And I think if people want to see new ideas explored with this concept, you have to be accepting that there's going to be new cast, which means you can't be mean to people playing Krueger that aren't Robert Englund. Um, so yeah, that this is I think this is my final tiering. Um, I definitely I definitely want to. I know I referenced it a couple times already, but for those of you who are hardcore Krueger fans and did not have the chance to watch it yet, I am going to reference the Never Sleeps Again Elm Street Legacy documentary here now because it covers all of the movies except for the 2010 remake. So if you just want to like if you love these movies like I do, I think it's a great way to get more information about these movies or just for fun behind the scenes. Like it has a lot of the cast and they discuss their time working on the movies, and then for specifically those of you who like 2 and maybe just want more information about why 2 was more controversial or for why 2 makes people icky now, or why 2 is still considered beloved, because as someone who is in the LGBT community but does not see it in the same light as others, I'm gonna go back to reference the Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street as well, which is the documentary made by Mark Patton. I think both of these documentaries are very good. I just did not reference that one as much because that one was more directly referencing Mark Patton's experience with the movie and not the overarching like creative experience of the movie. And I wanted to try and I'm not going to defend what happened on 2. I'm going to always say trust Mark Patton's experience, which is why I want to keep recommending the documentary. I just wanted to say that for people who liked that movie, um, you should go and watch those documentaries to have your own opinion. And then if you can still enjoy these movies, if you can still enjoy 2 and not feel icky, I want you to enjoy that. Which is why before I close this out, I'm going to recommend these 2 documentaries to my hardcore Krueger fans, because as a hardcore Krueger fan who is sad that Wes Craven sometimes holds on to his license too tight and we don't get more content, It sucks. It sucks that Nightmare on Elm Street 2010 was not received well, and we got stuck with not a lot of content after that. So yeah, it, this is what I would consider my final ranks. Again, just a reminder. I do think that most of these movies are very watchable. I would never say that any of these movies are like so bad that like they're not a movie. All of these movies, like how do I put this? None of these movies are so bad they're like Avatar: The Last Airbender by M Night Shyamalan. Okay, I'm not. We the, all these movies are in a class of their own. I just needed you all to understand that, like, if you're a fan of this franchise, there's so much content to get from this, and there's so many documentaries. And when you've consumed as much as I have, it'll flavor your opinion maybe differently. And if you haven't, maybe it doesn't. And I hope that if you enjoyed this stream, that you'll come back later, and if not, that's totally fine. And if this is from the VODs channel, let me know in the comments which one of these movies is your favorite, because I'm super excited to hear the opinions, because I love this franchise so much, and I I consumed all these movies in such a short time span, and I know someone's gonna be like, "You you forgot X. Does that change your opinion?" And I'm just like, "No, probably not, but I'm happy that you remembered that. I just it's so much content." Anyway, thanks for tuning in, everyone. It was so nice to this was really fun. I really liked this. I'm I'm probably gonna do something like this for Halloween next year. I just wanted to do one because Halloween is my favorite holiday, and I'm a big fan of doing scary themed specials because Halloween is in general one of my favorites, and I am a big horror buff, hence why DVD is my theming for my entire channel. So I hope to catch you all in the next one. Bye!